Although they did start working with the Beals revolver in the year of 1856, it would not be the same as what you think of the Remington New Model Army today.
And if you're like me, you're into the history stuff, the books, like the guns are worth their weight in gold. Because a gun, it's fun to shoot, it's fun to point with, but without the story there, if you're a history person like I am, without the story, it really doesn't mean all that
The Ruger Security 9.
Can I redraw?
You already looked?
No.
You sure
All
you did?
Now on three.
Another pro, at least a pro to me, is these guns are kind of a project. I like to look at them as I'm getting an advanced kit build in the mail whenever I get one. So it's a project that you can go down the road and you can either leave it as
Most people believe that the Walker was Colt's first extent to a very, very large pistol, but it wasn't. This was. This is Colt's 1839 to patent firearms revolving carbine pistol. It is massive.
Oh, hello everybody. And we're back. And I have not done this in a while, so you might have to bear with me here. But welcome to the Reload Show. And tonight, I'll kind of let him introduce himself down there. Got
Right there,
Rivero
yep.
311. Yeah. So I'll let you introduce yourself and kind of let you let everybody know what we're going to talk about tonight. And go ahead.
Right. Awesome. You hear me? Everything's good?
Hmm?
All right. Yeah, excited to be here. Happy to talk about muskets. I'm a work in progress, so I'm sure I'm going to say something, and I'll be looking back at this a year from now and be very cringing at that. It's all part of the learning process.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Happens to all of us. As a matter of fact, there's so many videos from my past that I just wish to delete and completely remake again. So yeah, no worries, man. That's normal. It's common.
Ethan said he put a disclaimer in, and that was a great idea, and I've gone and done that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, about me, lifelong military history nerd. I'm sure we all have that in common. Former Marine infantryman, Revolutionary War reenactor. I've been collecting for about 10 years, but I'm pretty new to the flintlock and historical arms, only about 3 years at the moment. But yeah, and we're going to be talking about musket diplomacy, French arms, and the American War of Independence. So,
Indeed.
exciting. Yeah.
I can talk about that.
The one that got us all here.
So yeah, if you guys got any questions in here about French muskets, this might be the night to ask them, because I'm going to be honest, I have a feeling Rivero 311 down there knows quite a bit more than I do on these. I've had to go. I'll admit, I spent what was it? I spent the better part of a couple months on orders earlier this year. And I had a lot of downtime, and I spent a lot of that time watching your videos. And I was like, yeah, I need to fix that. And then I go back and watch my old videos. I was like, this is rough. We're putting a disclaimer on everything.
Everything.
You got the mystery musket that I thought was a Model 9. So,
so I looked into that, and it really is an AN9. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's just, I think, and I'm not 100% sure, but I'd say I'm 99% sure, just reading from what Bianchi says, mainly, that's a Belgian-made AN9. I mean, it's still an AN9, still would have been used by the French military, but yeah, there was a lot of people. That's not an AN9. I was like, hey, it really is. It really is.
Well, before we get too far, let's go through the list of people here. Say hi to everybody in the chat. So, let's see. Hunter Savage. Oh, I am too excited as well. Let's see. Carrie Sotomayor. San Diego standing by. Ooh, we got ourselves a Southern Californian.
I was going to say 90. Something about palm trees or something down there. Anyhow.
Texas 1836. Oh, nice. Let's see. Ooh, you were at San Jacinto for the 188th anniversary. Now that sounds fun. I miss Texas. You know, I grew up there, and I spent my entire time as a young man trying to leave that place. And once I left it, I spent my entire life trying to go back. Texas is the closest to heaven you can get, I believe, personally.
I just spend most of my time when I'm in Texas and El Paso, so...
Let's see. One question from Texas 1836 is hoping to get some footage to kick off his channel. Any advice? Well, if you don't mind, I'll go first. If that's cool with you, Ethan.
Yeah.
The best advice I can tell you is do your best on every video you can. Don't short anything. Put as much time in as you can. Say I'm going to spend X amount of time on the video. Even if I'm done before that, then we'll try to cut up edits and make it better. And then every time you release another video, try to make it better than the next. And at the same time, watch other channels who are successful. Look at the way they edit. Look at the way they incorporate music. Look at the way their, shots, like different shots are filmed, and take that as a way of doing it as well. You're not per se stealing their stuff, but what I'm saying is look at it and take it as a tool to use yourself on any other kind of filming or storytelling. You want to try to create, because if you notice, you go to the really top channels, they all seem very similar on just high-end quality in the way they film, the way they do stuff. And that's because that's kind of what people have a standard for today. If you see that standard, try to live up to that standard. And it really makes a big difference. It really does, especially the editing and taking the time and good audio. Audio is more important than you'd believe. You can actually watch a video that the video quality is not so good, but if the audio quality sucks, most people won't even watch the video, even if it's perfect video quality.
To be quite honest, when you're doing videos like we do, which are kind of like informational videos, historical, whatever, most people actually listen to those videos more than actually watch them. If you notice, just put your headphones in, going down the road in the car or something, you listen to it. But yeah, I see what you're saying about the audio there. I still need to find my lapel mic.
Yeah, trust me too, right?
Yep. But anyhow.
But yeah, I really think that is the key to success. And don't do it for money, because you're going to be shortchanged more than you believe. Just do it because you like doing it. If you somehow the worlds collide and the universe throws you that favor and you hit that out of the park, and you're just like one of the best YouTubers ever, then, yay, that's great. That's awesome. Love to see one of our community do that. Just don't expect it at first, especially at first. The first 1,000 subs are the hardest. I mean, it is the hardest.
That's what I think it took us. It took us 2 years to get to 1,000 subscribers. So
it was like 2.5, almost 3, I think, for me, if I remember right. It's been a while.
It's slow.
But yeah, it's slow. But once you get past that, if you put the effort in, once you're past 1,000, it's a little bit easier. It seems to be a little bit easier to grow from there.
And even like you were talking about, Snapper, taking ideas for good footage. Sometimes I'll watch a movie and there'll be a scene that'll stick with me. And there's one that I can think of, and I'm going to try a little spoiler alert for my next Independence Day video, which is, by the way, surprise, going to be on French muskets in the American Revolution, Guns of Revolution.
Oh, my shock.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, my shock.
But it's like I've had this, and I did it a little bit with the Brown Bess video in the intro. There's that scene from Patriot, the farm scene where you got the dusk and it's kind of, gloomy. You got a little bit of smoke hanging there, and then all of a sudden you can just see the flashes of those flintlocks going off in the background. That paired with some footage of the Waterloo reenactment they did here a few years ago, where you can actually see the volley go off in the distance, and then you just hear that thunder, from a mile away, like 2 or 3 seconds later. that may or may not be playing a part in the next Independence Day video. I think I'm going to have about a 30-man volley, attempt to have a 30-man volley off in the distance.
That'd be cool. That'd be real cool.
Anyhow, I'm going to go to the next one here. Diane Houston, good evening, all. The reason I bring up Diane Houston is I had to let her know I have got her lock almost all ready to go. I did a little work on a Northwest trade gun lock for her, and I got some polishing, and I've got a case harden, 2 more parts on it, and it's ready to go. But that thing is a flamethrower for a lock. I was surprised at how much spark that thing threw. So, yeah.
Nice.
Let's see. Next Snapper. Read the next comment.
Louisiana Gray. Hey, buddy. This is one of our, I would say, like one of my favorite people always in the chat. Really cool guy. Louisiana Gray. You're awesome, buddy.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Smoke in the Woods. I don't know who that guy is.
I've never heard of him before. Carrie Sotomayor. Am I saying that right?
Do what?
If I mispronounce it, I went to public school. Me fell English, me not know why. Okay. And then there's Garrett. I miss Garrett already. Let's see. All things black powder. Rock McLaughlin. Brandon Birch. Thank you guys for coming in. Let's see. Desert Rat 45. Hey. So Turkey Creek, Malcolm G, Antique Gunslinger, Josh McGaskin. Sorry, like I said, I went to public school, guys. Come on. Malcolm G, Hardy, hey Hardy, David W, and Kerry Sotomayor again. I hope I didn't slay those names too bad.
Stottlemyre.
Hey, and then there's Jake. Howdy, Jake.
I got a video coming up about French powder eventually once I actually get around to making it. I just got all my ingredients in, and I just got to get some time to actually make the powder. So that's something else to look up or to look forward to. All right, I think we're caught up, Snapper.
I think so. Are there any questions before we start our little get-to-go? Just before we start the history lesson for today?
Like I said, guys, any questions on French muskets or firearms in general in the American Revolutionary War tonight is probably the night to ask. So, without further ado, I may get this thing started off by asking my own question. I got to think of one right quick.
This is not even prepped. This isn't even prepped.
Oh, no.
So you went to Guilford, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I had heard there's a museum there, correct?
Yep.
I think.
Amazing. Yep.
I heard there's a 1717 French musket on display at that museum that was used at Guilford.
So they have a 1766/68. I actually have pictures from it. They have 3 muskets. They have 1 German, 1 French, 1 English.
Okay.
I didn't see a 1717 in that case, but I can go relook through my pictures because I think that the French musket actually had that IP to Joseph Perkins initials on the stock.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of threw it off. And then also leading up to and before Guilford, 4,000 French muskets were sent from the Philadelphia Supply Agency to refit the Southern Army. They say that happened before and after. They do have a bunch. They have the musket. I'm pretty sure they have a musket they said they picked off the battlefield. I don't remember 1717, but it could be there. There's a great museum.
I just saw. Yeah, I can't even remember where I'd heard that from. I don't know if it was one of my commenters or something, but somebody had mentioned 1717s being used in the Revolution, and they were like, "Well, there's one at the museum at Guilford," and I was like, I always kind of thought about that, but yeah, I wasn't 100% sure. That's why I kind of asked.
Well, I mean,
but 1717 by 1770s, 1780s, that's pretty old.
Yeah, so I actually have a note on this. Decius Wadsworth was a captain of ordnance, and he writes in 1814, the oldest pattern of French musket which I can find an account of was a 1746. a change that was made in 1754, another change that took place in 1763. And this is what's interesting.
So you got the 60, 63,
yes.
54, and the
46.
The 46, which I think the only difference really between the 46, if I remember right, and the 28 is longer. Yeah, 46 was the first one that they put the MLE model on the Tang. And then the 46, another difference was they had lengthened out the flats on the side of the barrel.
Okay.
And I think other than that, it's basically a 28, if I remember right. And I think it has an iron rammer. Is another difference between the regular 28. Sorry, I just that had to shoot that rabbit before I. Yeah.
We were talking about Charleville, right? And then he says the improvements adopted in 1766, 68, 70, 71, 73. So I'm like, 68? What? That's not supposed to be a thing.
Yeah.
And this was he was a captain of ordnance. He's the one that talks about that it was the 1763 known commonly as a Charleville. And then it says, from this statement, the terminology Charleville pattern was born and continued in use until the American Standard Musket of 1815. And it says, because Wadsworth was a veteran in the field of ordnance, his comments come into a certain expertise amongst arms holders. And that comes from U.S. Military Flintlocks by Schmidt.
Still need to get that book.
Oh, yeah.
I really need to get that book before July, especially. Interesting. So, yeah, and I've also got, I don't know if you got that, wow, now I can't even remember the name of it. I was reading through it for that Colonial Troop musket. The, what was the
French Arms in Colonial America?
Yes, that one. Yeah, that was actually a pretty good one. I was really surprised whenever I opened that up and just found out, I think there's about a page and a half worth of information on that 1779.
I talked to my historian friend that works at the museum, and when you did the you're like, "Hey, Revere, what gun is this?" I'm nothing without my books and sources. I was like,
"Yeah,
on my phone." And this is how I got into this, is because online information is so garbage. Yeah. Like,
it is.
American Smithsonian has the labeling wrong. You can't trust an auction house. You don't know what you're looking at. Speaking about making money, the amount of money I spend in books.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is you talk to people like 10 years ago, they would have said books are dead. Like nobody's buying books anymore. Now it's the only place you can go to find good, trustworthy information. You can't find it on the internet. Everything is opinion and just tribal knowledge. Nothing is 100%. It's quite bad, actually. It's really bad. Yeah, and that's just all across the board, not just, your guys' era, the era I like. Yeah, it's just everything is like that.
Hey, R.L. Wilson. There, go ahead.
Oh, yes. But let me tell you a rant about my most favorite person I'd always loved to have stabbed, R.L. Wilson. Oh, God, that man, he ruined everything. I hate that guy a lot. There's a certain place in hell for him. If you ever read Dante's Inferno, there's like a Pope tube. They would shove the popes in. That's exactly where I hope R.L. Wilson ended up.
Yeah. R.L. Wilson was a little shady and kind of ruined a lot of information.
He stole from the greatest cult museum there was, some of the best, rarest guns in the world. And he would take them, he would sell them, right? He'd grab a gun, work with one of the people that's there, and then he would come up with a story behind the gun that isn't real, to sell it at a higher hype so he would get more commission on it. And he would take even more commission than he was allowed to. Or he would take guns that were so rare and they shouldn't be leaving the museum. He would sell those, saying that they were duplicates. Instead of the actual duplicates, he would sell the original, like very first kind of thing. And he also had several guns that he had taken from the museum that were like very, very rare, like one or two of only. And then they would be sent to a gun shop, and it'd be gone for 3 or 4 months. And then you realize the gun shop they went to, they actually specialized in making replicas, like making a gun perfect to a replica. So they don't even know if they have the original gun back. So yeah, and it'd be found in these places. So they're not sure, is this the actual original gun we have here in the museum, or is it a really, really good replica? Because these people were over the top. I mean, they were doing everything the same way they used to. So it wasn't like, hey, you could just look at the metal. I mean, you could technically, I guess, but they would use like wrought iron when they'd make something. So it's not as easy to separate it and try to figure it out modern day wise without spending a crap ton of money, especially back when this all happened. This was in the 80s and 90s. Well, it started in the 70s, 80s ish, and it kind of started falling apart by the 90s. But yeah, he still didn't get in any major trouble. The guy supposedly went to jail, but for very, very little time. And yeah, it was a shame. He ripped off and rewrote history, and so much of the history on, especially Colt, because that's what I love the most. Colt is wrong, and it's mostly because of him. A lot of the stuff you hear about modern Colts, it's wrong, and it's 90% because of him, and it's sad.
Yeah. So,
but
to make it,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Snapper doesn't like R.L. Wilson.
I don't.
Don't say.
Yeah.
Neither do I.
I'm a nice guy, but he pushed me too far. Okay.
I always get a chuckle out of that. Okay, we got a question here, and I'm going to let Rivero 311 answer this one.
Oh man.
Hardy has a question. What was the most common long arm in use during the Revolution that people don't usually think of now? And then later on, somebody had asked him what side. Yeah, Stottlemyre had asked him what side. He said any side, I guess, maybe on the colonial side. So basically, what was the most underrated firearm that was used a lot?
The Fowler. The Fowler is the original American gun. Everyone thinks it's a pin-fastened English gun or it's a French musket. Those exist, and they exist in large quantities. But I love hearing about the Fowlers, because when I first heard of Fowler and I see them out, I'm like, what is this? Like, what is different between this and a musket? It's basically just a lightened musket with no bayonet lug. Yep. So it's going to have smaller parts, and amazingly enough, they come up for auction very commonly, and you can get a 1750s Fowler, and they'll have them under $1,000. Mm-hmm. But the Fowlers were used extensively, especially in the beginning of the war, because it was just the militia acts that were in place were bring a strong firelock. There was no bring a gun of this caliber. It was just bring a strong firelock, bring lead, bring powder, and you can make your rounds to fit your individual barrels when needed. So the Fowler.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that is the American way. I mean, look at the common hunting rifle basically is what they fought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of which, I was looking on online auction sites like I do now a lot for originals. Thank you, Rivero 311. And I went and I actually found a original fusil de chasse, and it was an old one. It was an early one, and it had a bayonet lug fitted to it. So I was like, there's your pretty cool Fowler that's been modernized or modified for military service. But going back to that question, so as far as the most common long arm in use, especially on the colonial side, and I kind of say it's not so bad now, but about 10 years ago, I would definitely say it was one of the most underrated, was definitely the Charleville or the 1766, because everybody you could ask what they used in the Revolutionary War, everybody'd say two things: the Brown Bess and the Kentucky Long Rifle. To people who had just skimmed over, Revolutionary War history, that was the two guns that everybody always said it was. And what is it now? I think they said anywhere between 100 and 110,000. Just the 1766 model got imported. So that would have been on the American side. British side, I'm not as well read up on, but I think I think there was more shortland patterns later on in the war, but I know there was a lot of longland patterns early on, wasn't there? Yeah,
I think it's mostly longland. Off the top of my head, Jim Gallagher, he's a historian over at the museum in Yorktown. He states that the second models don't really come until Saratoga, so that is the summer of 77. Mm-hmm. And so that's pretty late, but you do see a lot of restocked and American walnut longlands. But yeah,
you mentioned. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's all I had.
Well, you mentioned restocking. And that reminds me of another thing I saw on an auction site. Thank you, Rivero 311. And it was being sold as a Pennsylvania Fowler. This was the only Fowler that I've ever seen that had barrel bands and an iron ramrod and Charleville written on the lock. It was definitely a 66 Charleville that had been restocked in Tiger Stripe maple, and it was original. Like, they had pictures of all the markings and everything, but you could tell they just restocked it in Tiger Stripe, which looked a little weird, but it was kind of cool at the same time.
Did it have
slip? I think I sent you a picture of that, didn't I? It was either
Probably.
you or Madras Arsenal. It only sold for like $1,200.
Oh man,
It's kind of original.
Did it have a?
It's actually not a bad price.
Oh, and it had US stamped on the lock plate, if I remember right.
It sold for how much?
Like $1,200.
And it had US stamp. Wow, someone got away.
And if I hadn't
Robbery.
have spent all of my allowance on an AN9, no, the 1779, I'd spent it. Yeah, I'd spent my allowance on the 1779, and I saw that pop up, and I was like, yikes! But oh well.
That's a beautiful piece, though.
Yes, I'll get one of these days. Let's see here. Whoa, snapper's blinking in and out.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we having quite a bit of wind here. So if you guys hear any weird noises, there's a set of French doors next to me, to our back door patio, and that thing is just going crazy.
Yeah. So here's a question for you, Rivero 311, and I kind of have an opinion on this one. But and Hardy brings it up. He says, or not Hardy, Kerry Stottlemyre says, I'm going to guess and say the locally built long rifle or a French-made musket, a 1766 or a 1777 AN9, but he's like, I don't know, Jack. So that brings up the question: were there any Americans using 1777s issued?
No, I have not. I have not seen any proof of 1777s. The French had them at Yorktown. I've never seen that confirmed. That's just kind of general knowledge I've picked up.
And there was like only 400, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Readout number 9. I think.
Readout number 9. Yeah.
Yeah, because readout 9 and 10.
There were more French soldiers, Marines there than Continentals.
Yeah, which I actually found interesting because that. Obviously that 1779, it's stamped 1786 on the stock, which would have been last year production for that model. But
they did export. They exported them. They exported them after 1785.
Yeah, and
I sent you that. Yeah.
Yeah, you found some pretty interesting information on that gun after I made that video. I found pretty interesting. I have to go back and find it.
With that being said, if anyone does find proof that a 77 was used, I will happily change my mind. I just haven't seen it. Some online auctions are going to sell you a load of goods and tell you that 77s were used, but I've never seen it. And none of the books say it.
Yep. It's every single book I've read on the subject. They all kind of are in agreement that the 1777 was really only in use by the French troops. But,
so it's possible, just not probable. Is that what we're saying here?
Yeah, it's
just highly unlikely.
It's about as possible as seen. I don't know. Yeah, it's not very.
Bigfoot.
Not very likely.
So you're saying there's a chance. You're saying there's a chance.
Hey, my video.
I'm trying to think of some foreign-made rifle that was made during the Civil War that somebody tries to sell on Gunbroker, and it was 100% not used in the Civil War, but they're like Civil War era. And then the guy
Civil War era trapdoor Springfield.
Civil War.
Civil War era trapdoor Springfield.
This is my 1865 58 rimfire trapdoor, first Allen conversion that was used at Gettysburg.
Used at Gettysburg.
Yep. Yeah.
I have a model 1803 Harper's Ferry, and I haven't made the video because there's a whole argument if Lewis and Clark took 1803s with them.
Oh, I need Garrett here for that one. Actually, we got the guy to ask in the comment section here. Turkey Creek 1823.
Well, this is good because I need to know this before I make a video about it.
We also have an 1803 Harper's Ferry that we need to make a video on. and I've been really busy here lately. But yeah, Turkey Creek 1823 actually built the one that we have, and it is spot on.
Nice.
Oh, Garrett says to ask you about your Winchester musket. I showed him that video this morning. He went,
Yeah, so I went in to a gun show, and as soon as I walk in, it's all guns I'm not interested in. And then I see this Winchester musket. I'm like, will you trade for this? And he's just like, what do you got? And I'm like, I got a Rockola M1 carbine. I got an Eli Whitney in 1841, and I have a Moss 36. He's like, I'll do that. I was like, all right, I know nothing about Winchesters. And so I have it.
where'd you get the bayonet from?
The bayonet came with it. So, yeah.
That's interesting.
You'll have to look at the short snapper. It is long.
I need to see this. Yeah, this is interesting.
Yeah. It's on one of my shorts. Yeah, it's and it's one of those things. I don't have any books on it, so I have I can't make a video. So my video would be 5 seconds long. It'd be like, it's a musket. It's called a musket. The terminology has it called a musket, but it's not really a musket. And then I had we went down a rabbit hole. It's like, it's not really a musket. I was like, well, it's just kind of phrasing.
It's called the musket.
Yeah, like the infantry.
So I'm guessing it is not a muzzle loader, being a Winchester. It's a lever action.
It is. What year is
Oh, are we talking? It's like a lever action, but it's a long rifle, like long rifle.
It's got bands
Okay,
on it.
I know what you're talking about. I've heard of people. Yeah, I've heard of people calling those muskets before.
I mean, it's in the name. It is.
It's in the name.
It is a musket.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
So I'm sitting there going, to Winchester? Like, that's a little late for muzzle loading. It's like a little late. I don't know what they were doing. Did they have a time machine or something? Like, what did they do?
I can't laugh and not laugh and look at it. It's just ridiculous.
It's just ridiculous. Yeah. Those are my favorite kind of guns. They're ridiculous ones.
Turkey Creek says you are dead on, Rivero 311, about the civilian smoothbore. Yeah, I'd have to agree. That's another thing I always think is funny is when you talk about the American militia troops, what they were armed with in the Revolution. Most people say they were armed with a rifle. And I'm like, yeah, there was rifles, but not as many as you think.
Yeah.
There's like this picture that's been painted of the American Revolution where every single American soldier is fighting from the trees with a long rifle. And I'm like,
yeah, Kentucky long rifle. Yeah.
No, sure. The infantry won. It was the light infantry that took out Redoubt 10. It's the infantry, man. It's a slugfest. It's your average grunt out there in line, loving life, exchanging blows. Oh my God.
I wouldn't want to be anywhere else either.
Yeah.
One of the first references I hear about actual rifles being used in North America was from DeWitt Bailey's book. I got because of British Muzzleloaders, the YouTube channel. DeWitt Bailey's book on the. I'm having a terrible time with these names. I think it's the British flintlock rifle from. Yeah, I can't remember the dates on it, but anyhow, there's a story in the beginning of a soldier at Braddock's defeat at the Monongahela, and he's talking about he could tell the difference between being shot at by the natives with the smooth bores because he said you just hear the loud boom. He said, and then every now and then he'd say you'd hear a whizzing through the air. He said it sounded like ripping paper, and he said those were those spun up rifles.
The spinning of the bullets make the noise.
Yep. And I think DeWitt Bailey had mentioned in that book that he's like, that was really kind of like the first mention of rifles being used in North America in combat.
That is a crazy thing to think of right now. There's 3 infantrymen talking about history.
Yeah, I know.
That is not right. I mean, there's something wrong here. The knuckles raggers should not be doing this.
We need a bunch of SOCOM guys trying to motivate you and telling you to go.
Yeah, somebody needs to be yelling at you to read more while you're doing push-ups, while you're talking about history.
Here, put that pencil in your mouth and go to the front line of your rest and write me a
position and write it out.
Without moving your head.
No.
Let's see here. I had some questions here. Oh, Jay Wheeler asks.
Hey, Jay.
Yeah. He says, he's like, so here's a question. So as long as I have known Snapper, I've never asked, how did you get the name Snapper?
Oh, well, it's a very interesting story. Next.
Oh, okay.
No, really, it's believe it or not, I used to have my regular name there, and anybody who's ever been knows me. I actually like turtles a lot, especially snapping turtles. I love the guys; they're the greatest. They're the coolest little turtles ever. They're like dogs, but way smarter. No joke. Like a snapping turtle can be incredibly smart. You could
Yeah.
teach it to fetch. You could do all kinds of crazy things with a snapping turtle.
The thing
And
that,
they're also big and scary and mean
Yeah.
if they want to be, but they're also the biggest babies in the world. They remind me of like Rottweilers.
well,
You
we
know
got
where?
the alligator snappers.
Oh yeah, I like those too.
Dinosaurs.
Those are actually the big dinosaur alligator snappers. Are actually they're not as smart, but they're very like stoic creatures, man. They're cool. They're cool in their own way. I love them too. I'd love to have one.
So getting off.
But I just put my name like just the wild snapper just once because I couldn't think of any name at all instead of my regular name. So I was watching a lot of snapping turtle videos. Okay, all right. I mean that's it. Just snapping turtles.
Get off.
And yeah, I just kept it and I never changed it. I was like, you know what? Oh, I'll take you from Snapper. I'll just keep Snapper. And yeah, I kind of like the nickname. It kind of fits, I guess.
I know it's off subject of what we're going to talk about, but you're talking about how smart snappers are. I was impressed.
Thank you.
with
I thank you. I think I am too.
Oh, yeah, snapping turtles. I was impressed on whenever the ponds all started drying out around here last summer. I think I sent you some of the videos, Snapper, of this convoy of snapping turtles going down the road
Oh yeah.
to the river like 4 miles away. I was like, that's pretty smart. They actually know where that thing is.
No, they're incredible animals. As a matter of fact, if you raise one as a baby and you're really nice to it and it never has any reason to really fear you,
Mhm.
it is insane the amount of care and attention it will give to you as a person. Like I know a guy who has one, and I mean he treats it like a puppy dog. And this turtle doesn't like to sleep unless it's laying on his feet. Like this thing acts just like a puppy dog. I mean, he gets home, that turtle's going crazy just to see him. Everywhere he goes, that turtle's right next to him. Like turtle is so upset every time he goes to work. I mean, it is the neatest thing. Imagine a puppy dog that really loves you, and then switch that out with like a 50-pound
Dinosaur.
dinosaur. Yeah, basically.
Yeah. And then
And they're incredibly fierce, but yet very like protective of their owners as well. It's really interesting because you wouldn't think a lizard basically is that smart, but man, they're incredible animals.
so Revere 0311, tell us how you got your YouTube name. I know where the last part comes from.
Hoorah. Yeah.
It's got to be something about turtles, though. If there's not turtles, it's not a cool story.
No, I played computer games. It's my gamer tag. So
And 0311, I wonder,
Not
Marine.
an 0331. Not an
Slid through,
0331,
man.
0311.
just that basic line just made it.
Yep.
I had a 19 on my ACT, so I was going straight to the infantry. It was
Infantry.
either that or going to run JV cross country at a community college. It's like, nah, man, I'm getting out of Iowa.
Well,
Oh,
probably better than mine because I had gotten I just got out of basic training and they had given me that we zeroed with irons and then we zeroed with the CCO and I'd rather zero with the irons.
I hate the CCO, by the way. I never could hit crap with it.
And then I got to my unit and I got an ACOG.
World changing.
And I mentioned on some video, I can't remember what channel it was, how much I like the ACOG, and some guy got on there and was like, if you were actually in the Army, you'd know how terrible the ACOG was. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll just change my name to 11
Like
Bang
what?
Bang. Yeah, I was that guy straight out of basic training. But it stuck me.
Hey, I don't care what anybody says. The ACOG is by far the single most deadliest thing they added to a rifle.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the ACOG, what? Everyone buys an ACOG. I've never met any guy.
Exactly. Heck, I even buy ACOGs because I love them so much. And I'm happily, they're probably better optics these days, but I would still rather have an ACOG because you know why? I've never broken an ACOG.
Yeah.
I've seen guns completely torn apart, but the ACOG still worked fine.
So a story about the ACOG. One night I was sitting, well, I wasn't sitting, I was up in a tower in Syria, pitch black, no light, didn't have my nods on. And I'm just, kind
As
of
one would.
strolling around with in my flip flops and my hoodie, and got my M4 and I'm walking around and I was talking to some fellas up in the tower and I go to walk out and I wasn't paying attention and I had my squad leader up there with me and I walk right off the edge of an 8-foot HESCO and I land smack on that M4 and right on that ACOG.
Ooh.
And my squad leader was Laotian and it was hilarious because I just heard that Asian laugh over 8 feet above me. I just heard and I look up there and we go to shoot the next morning to make sure I'm still zeroed. And that ACOG, even though it fell straight 8 feet on top of that ACOG into the gravel, into the rocks, it still was zeroed. And I was sold after that.
No, they're great. They're worth it. I actually posted a video shooting down the sights with my phone with one, and someone commented, "That's not an ACOG." It's like, and then he got me because I was just like, "Do I own an ACOG?" And I know I own an ACOG. I went over and looked at him, like, "Yeah, it's an ACOG."
To make sure the letters are molded in there.
It's like, hey, I spent like $1,000 on this thing. It better be an ACOG.
Yeah.
My girlfriend told me I don't have the personality to take criticism online.
Yeah, don't worry. Most of us don't either until you've done it for a while, and then, believe it or not, it turns into a game.
Yeah, and you know,
it's like, oh, please, somebody, because I get to actually act the way I wish I could act all the time. But yeah,
I've just started posting my negative comments on Facebook, especially the ridiculous ones. I'll be like, and I've got a little subsection called "My Comments Are Wild," and I've got paper cartridges has come on there, and he was like, yeah, he starts telling me some of his horror stories. He's like, yeah, it can get pretty interesting. But anyhow,
you love how somebody who doesn't know you will make assumptions on everything, and it's usually like that's not like that's not an ACOG. It's like you do realize ACOG now makes different, like the reticles on the inside are now different. You can get them in like 3 or 4 different styles.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's just funny because like I knew what it was, but he made me question myself, and it was just like no one has the amount of confidence as some random dude on YouTube.
Yeah, right,
also, like
right.
someone being like reenactors aren't real.
Yeah.
It's like, of course, like
what?
Yeah,
that reminds me, I did an accuracy test with that with my 1766, you know, kind of out of the box, and one of the comments was, "This test is invalid because there's nobody downrange shooting at you."
This is fact. Yeah.
And I was like, yes. So, all right. So next time I go to do an accuracy test, I need to go get my little brother Caleb and go tell him to take his brown bess and go stand out there 50, 100 yards.
And shoot at me while I'm doing this.
And that'll make it more accurate. Yeah.
Somebody should tell that the Army's like your regular Army accuracy tests. You know, when you go qualify, they don't count because nobody's shooting at you.
That was another one I got here recently. I actually made that short over. It was a guy got on there and he was like, "You guys don't know anything. You've got that's not a safety on that Lehman rifle. Those are set triggers. It'll still go off if you pull that front trigger." And I was like, funny, because I'm holding this very rifle in my hand right now. I've taken it apart. I've looked at this lock, and I can guarantee you it won't go off until you pull that back trigger. Anyhow, going back to the subject, because Rivero 311, he kind of prepared for this, and there were some more comments, questions up here. Let's see here. Where did the Revolution get most of their guns? I'm assuming the American colonial troops. This is from Matthew Bryce. He says, from the French, right? He says, new to this community.
So, long story short, the French do provide over 108,000 recorded shipments of French infantry muskets and military arms. It might be as high as 250,000. I've heard that number thrown around. Some of those guns are lost at sea. So you're going to have 3 things. You're going to have captures. See my finger. You're going to have captures from the royal government. You're going to have like self-procured guns that are made committees in the state arsenals, and then you're going to have, like, you can also kind of refer to those as your militia muskets, and then you're going to have your French guns. So it's like 3 pillars, not one. Earlier in the war, you're going to have more English-style pin muskets. Later in the war, you're going to have more French muskets. But we still have the British pattern style muskets all the way into the 1800s. And in the early 1800s, I found this piece of information amazing. They were doing contracts with the British in like 1800 to make them firearms. In the whole Napoleonic Wars going on. But the interesting fact is that they had the British land pattern muskets, the Brown Bess, and the Navy wanted them. because they wanted him because they had the brass on it, and they wanted to give him to the Marine Corps because at sea all the muskets only last a year. So they had enough brown besses, English muskets, whatever, hanging out. So like there was a good selection.
So going kind of off of what you were talking about there about the Marines and the Navy preferring the brown bess style land pattern or sea pattern musket, I found it interesting. I got another one here recently, and I cannot hardly find any information on this gun. And the bit of information I did find, I kind of bet I was really skeptical of it, but some of it I did prove true. And I've got a Lane and Reed New England militia musket. And what's funny is it's like a baby land pattern musket in 69 caliber. And the source I had heard, and the one thing that does back this up is it does in fact have a Springfield barrel on it, is that the the Massachusetts militia had they were preferential to the British pattern of musket. And this Lane and Reed company had taken a bunch of old beat up 1795s in the 1830s. And then, they had broken stocks or whatever, and they restocked them, put a new lock on them with the 1795 or 1816 Springfield barrels. And they built basically miniature land pattern muskets, which technically it'd be like a miniature India pattern musket. I need to do a video on it. It's not working right now, but I do have it over there at the studio. But yeah, there were some more questions up here.
Jay Wheeler had a pretty good one.
Yeah, that's the one I'm looking for.
Yeah. What's y'all's favorite movie or show about the American Revolution? I haven't really watched a lot on it, but enjoy Turn.
What's that?
I love The Patriot. Yeah.
Yep, there you go.
Oh no! That actually is a good movie. I know it's a little.
That's gonna get me canceled from the reenacting community. They're gonna see that. But no, The Patriot, like just that scene of that nighttime dusk shootout.
Yes.
The punchiness.
Oh, at the beginning.
Guns,
yeah.
It's a fun movie, guys.
Yep.
It's the only movie we're gonna get about the South in the American Revolution. Just take it. Be happy with it. Like, people are so hard on it. It's like you have one movie. Like, come on, guys.
But let's be honest. If they made it now, it would be worse.
Yeah, it would be way
was
worse.
made before CGI too. Yeah.
And what's funny about that is I get The Patriot gets a lot of things wrong.
Yeah.
But if you really look into it, aside from I can think of like a handful of things, the Battle of Cowpens wasn't bad if you look at it as historical fiction. As in, there's definitely no guy named Benjamin Martin out there. Benjamin Martin is a conglomeration of Francis Marion, of, believe it or not, Jack Henson from the Civil War. He's rolled into there a little bit, and Daniel Morgan. And so it's, if you look at it as there's not a guy named Benjamin Martin out on the battlefield, because even the things that they got wrong at Cowpens, and I'm sure you can name off a few more things than I can, but number one, Cornwallis wasn't there. Tarleton was in charge.
Tarleton doesn't die.
What's that?
Tarleton
doesn't die. Yes, or yeah, there's you too. But you also got to, like I say, you got to watch it as historical fiction. But Tarleton, depending on the story, I got to remember there's a story of Tarleton actually being involved in a duel with one of Washington's relatives after the battle.
Washington, right? Colonel Washington.
Yes.
Yeah, and they face off again at Guilford.
There's that. And also, if you're replace the name Benjamin Martin with Daniel Morgan, one of the things I saw that was wrong there was they show, and it's a little thing, it's kind of a nitpicky thing, is they show the American troops as the British are coming over the hill. They show them harassing them basically with artillery, where in reality, if you were going to use Benjamin Martin as Daniel Morgan, you would have had him with his riflemen out there skirmishing out on the field and then falling back. But other than that, like I said, Tarleton didn't die. Cornwallis wasn't there. The artillery and Daniel Morgan skirmishing. it's really pretty spot on.
So Tarleton gets captured at Yorktown, and he was worried they were going to hang him. Like he was, from what I remember, it's a good story, so I'm going to tell it. So like Tarleton's like, because he's across the river from Yorktown, and they surrender, and he's like, I don't know what's going to happen here.
Waxhaw started thinking about Waxhaw Massacre.
Yeah, he started thinking about, hey, he got knocked off his horse. He lost control for those 5 seconds. That got all the Virginians killed. But yeah,
that's
See, if they would have used Arthur Morgan instead of Daniel Morgan, it would have been a much better movie.
I actually named my kid Daniel Morgan.
Oh, did you?
Yes. I love the story of Daniel Morgan. He's like one of the, I would have to say, if there was an unsung hero of the American War of Independence, it would probably have to be Daniel Morgan.
Yeah.
And just that story of the whipping he got. And then at the surrender, hey, go tell your king he still owes me one lash. Wow. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm looking for some more questions. Oh, but yeah, movies. I'm trying to think of some Revolutionary War movies besides The Patriot. Turn was.
There's
I like
really
Turn
not a lot
as
I
a
can think
show.
of.
I like Turn as a show. Patriot was good.
Apple
really
TV is making a
That's not a
mini
lot.
series about Franklin in France, which I'm going to cover today. So
Okay.
this is going to be I have no idea if it's going to be good. I don't know how they're going to turn this in this
An action
degeneracy.
movie.
Yeah, so
They're gonna make it Napoleon 2.0.
Yeah,
So, has any of you guys seen that yet? By the way,
No.
I haven't seen it yet either.
I watched Waterloo religiously, like probably one of my all-time favorite movies. And I watched the miniseries Napoleon made in 2002, and it was surprisingly good. The actor on that did it. Oh, he nailed it. He knocked it out of the park. Let's see here. But yeah, I'd have to say Patriot probably, just because there's really not that many Revolutionary War movies ever made.
Yeah, it's a fun movie.
Yeah, and it is.
It is
beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Let's see.
It would be nice one day if Hollywood would make a very accurate description of a movie or a real life event into a movie, but let's be honest, they haven't done it yet, and they're not getting any better.
Well, did you hear what Ridley Scott told his historical advisor about Napoleon? Yeah, he basically told him that, and then when people started calling him out for everything he got wrong, he said, "Get a life."
Yeah, he might be closer to senile than.
I was having a lot of fun making memes about that movie, about the war instead of the battle of the pyramids, it was the battle against the pyramids. Anyhow, moving on. Let's see. I'm looking for some more comments. How common was the rifle in the Revolutionary War? From Antique Gunslinger.
So they are present throughout the entire war. So outside of Boston, there's Virginians there with rifles. At the Battle of Great Bridge, which is in Virginia, you have Virginians with rifles. Later in the war, Guilford Courthouse, the men on the flanks have rifles. Rifles are common.
But it's a specialty weapon.
It's a specialty weapon. They do exist, and they are uniquely American. The long ones are.
The long ones. And that was what I was going to get into. Contrary to popular belief, the British also used rifles. Not as much, but they had the Pattern 1776, which mine is ready. I just got to go get it. They had the Pattern 1776. They have the Ferguson, and both of those are in fairly limited numbers. And I've got to remember, I think there were 800 Pattern 1776 normal rifles, and they had 200 of what they called the Hanoverian Pattern 1776, which was basically a Jaeger. Which brings me into the other part of this: is you also have the German Jaeger. The Hessians had those, so it wasn't just. And there's actually have you gotten DeWitt Bailey's book on the British service rifles, flintlock service rifles? It's a really good read. Rob from British Muzzleloaders was the one that pointed me towards that one, and there's some stories about Washington's Irish skirmish between Washington's Irish and some of the British rifle troops up north. It was actually a really interesting story. Let's see here.
There's also one of the Germans, Johann Ewald. You can read his wartime diary online, and that's spelled Johannewald. He was a captain in the Hessian Jaeger Corps, and he serves from New York City in '76 all the way to Benedict Arnold's tobacco raids and the burning of, the attack on Virginia in 1781.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael Cicery, he's written a bunch of books about Virginia, and he pulls heavily from Ewald's primary sources. You talk about how the Benedict Arnold deploys the German riflemen all the time. These guys are getting worked, but they would move and flank, and they would always push back larger numbers of Virginia militiamen. And there's a bunch of, so he's a really great primary source if you want to hear about it.
What I find interesting is Benedict Arnold. If you read about the history of the Pattern 1776 rifle, I think it was the 800 standard Pattern 1776. Most of those were actually sent to Benedict Arnold, and they were issued out to Tory troops.
Okay.
So, Turkey Creek says if he remembers right, I can't remember the number on this one, but he said if he remembers correctly, there were only 100 Ferguson rifles. There weren't that many.
There weren't that many, but it's a disgrace that none of us have one.
Allegedly, Ferguson had George Washington in his sights at Brandywine. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
From
a certain point of view, yeah.
My favorite still is when he said, God himself couldn't take me off this mountain. And God was like, you know what? I'll allow it.
Yeah.
I'll allow it.
For certain. We do know what happens to him, so.
He's still on that mountain today.
Yep. Yeah. Which is funny because I don't know if you ever, Snapper, I'm sure you have. You ever read Louis L'Amour? We talked about this. We talked about this. There's actually a Louis L'Amour book called The Ferguson Rifle.
And I remember you telling me about I remember you telling. I was like, that sounds so familiar. And yes, I still want to look into it.
That was my introduction to the Ferguson as probably a 6 or 7 year old kid. Garrett used to sit there and he'd read us boys books by the fire. And one of the books was the Ferguson Rifle. And it's this story about this kid who helps out Ferguson during the Revolution. And he is gifted one of his Ferguson rifles. And the story is about how after the Revolution, this kid takes this Ferguson rifle in the early 1800s, and he goes out west with the long hunters and guys like that going way out into Missouri and whatnot. And they have a shooting competition where he says he can get off 6 shots a minute with his rifle, and they laugh at him. And then he said, "Yep, I got my 6 shots a minute off." It's a.
That would have been like having a super weapon back then.
Yeah, it's a fiction book, but as a kid to hear a story about this Ferguson rifle, and the other really interesting thing about that book is he talks about the process they went through for tanning hides, and I tried his process as a kid, and it worked.
So that was the brain tanning, right?
Yep, brain tanning and the smoking of the hide and everything like that. Let's see here. I'm looking for some more questions.
Not very many kids today, I think, under the age of 10 would be even willing to try that. The world has changed a lot since then.
I did a lot of trapping as a kid. Let's see here. David W. says he has a Lehman and it doesn't go off without setting the back trigger. Yep, same with mine. Set triggers. Is the trade musket and the Fowler the same thing? I can tell you from the French point of view, but I'll let Revere go.
I would say no, right? Trade muskets were. This is outside of my wheelhouse. I would say no.
The French had a. They differentiate. I'm not even going to try to use that word right now. They made different models. So for an actual trade musket, you had the Fusil de trait, which was no thrills, no frills, just a straightforward musket. And then for a Fowler, you had the dedicated Fusil de chasse, which was a little more refined, but they were basically at heart the same gun. It's just the trade muskets are always a little cheaper. And I know with the Northwest trade gun going later on, it's they're made to be mass produced, basically. Oh, Garrett nailed it. Yep, going back to favorite Revolutionary War movie. I don't know why I didn't think of this. Johnny Tremaine from Walt Disney. I don't know if you've ever seen that. That's probably my favorite. Old Walt Disney show. Really good one. I watch it every Independence Day. Let's see here. Yeah, Louisiana Gray says he likes the Patriots' close resemblance to the Swamp Fox. Yep. Little Francis Marion in there.
Yeah, it is a fun movie, even though it's not accurate. It is a fun movie. I do have to give it that. It's a good entertainment, and it's a good, I don't know, just get away from it and feel like the sights look right, you know? Looks like you're actually back then, but yeah.
It's like Riviera 311 said down here, there's something about that scene at that farmhouse.
I agree. That nighttime battle or like early morning foggish battle, that is, you actually could feel the fear in it when he comes that close to you.
Yep.
It's good. They did a really good job with that part of the movie. Really good job.
Yep. Oh yeah. Turkey Creek 1823 says every April 19th he watches April Morning. That's another one. I watch Johnny Tremaine on April 19th. I watch Johnny Tremaine a couple times a year. It's a good one. There's a scene on that Johnny Tremaine I just like so much where I think it's Pitcairn is talking to Dr. Joseph Warren before everything kicks off, and Pitcairn tells Dr. Warren, which Dr. Warren is another one of the unsung heroes of the Revolution. Yeah. Probably Daniel Morgan and Joseph Warren are two of my favorites.
Don't die early in the war. That's
exactly.
Bad for your reputation is to die early in the war.
But I mean, if you're going to go out, that's one way to go out.
Yeah, you're going to go out of Bunker Hill.
Go out of Bunker Hill, covering the retreat.
Yeah.
Didn't they do a deal here recently on they found his skull and they say he'd been executed? Yeah, he was executed with a 62 caliber pistol or a 60 caliber ball. Which they're like, yeah, that's pistol shot. But no, there's a scene on there where Pitcairn's talking to Joseph Warren, and he said, and this is Walt Disney. Before we get started here, he goes, I see that your men have been drilling every Sunday on their local village greens. This needs to be stopped immediately. I see that they are amassing weapons, powder, and ammunition. These need to be relinquished to the government. He's like, I need you to go tell them to do this. And Dr. Joseph Warren looks at him. He said, that I cannot do. Well, why not? Because free men will never relinquish the means of which they are to defend their liberty. I was like, yes. I get pumped.
If only people today had that same concept.
Yeah, Walt Disney won't make a movie about that.
No, not today.
Let's see here. The Allegheny Uprising. Earl Shaner puts that up there.
When my father-in-law passed away a couple of years ago, we went up to New York, and where they're from, and we went to, I forgot the exact name of it, but it's Fort Clinton, and I forgot the name of the other fort that's there. But they were revolutionary forts that were actually defeated by the British. And man, it's weird going to a place like that. You could see where all the barracks were, all that stuff, where you could actually go there. You can see the massive cannon. And knowing that we lost there is a weird feeling. It is, I don't know, it's still to this day, it kind of gets you upset, especially if you're, in the armed forces, because you're like, we don't lose. I mean, we do lose, don't get me wrong, but it's not something we walk away from very well at all, even 200 plus years later. It's eerie. It's super eerie being in, and you see how small these forts were. Like Fort Clinton, man. I mean, you could throw a rock across the entire thing easily. I mean, a foam ball you could throw across the thing easily.
I like Fort Ticonderoga. I always think of it, and I don't know why, because I always think of Fort Ticonderoga as the fort that changed sides every time the wind changed. It got captured. The French had it, and then the British had it, and the Americans had it. But
think of the name of that fort.
What you said, Snapper, is interesting because there's another one of these myths about the Revolutionary War that the Americans were always on top and that we were superior in everything we did because of our riflemen in the trees, and that we and the British were stupid for fighting in lines and with their inaccurate smoothbore muskets. And I always find that as kind of counterintuitive. For one, it's making the achievement that the American soldier gained during the Revolutionary War less
Trivial.
valuable.
It makes it trivial. Like, not that important, not as big.
It was easy.
Yeah. They're just a bunch of rednecks in the woods. That's why they won, when they just took on the greatest army in the world at the time and won.
People don't realize we lost a lot of different places, but we just won where it counted.
Yep. It's a miracle, and it truly is. It's a miracle that we won. At the end of the day, it's a miracle.
What's your thoughts on that, Rivero 311?
No, I was going to say there's a great Nathaniel Green quote. Speaking of underrated Americans in history, he has the quote that says, "We fight, we get beat, we rise and fight again."
Yep.
I mean, that's just chills. Like, Nathaniel Green goes down to the South and he loses he just goes down, but he keeps his army. He's not destroyed, and he just keeps fighting and fighting, and he grinds out a victory. But
and he won.
I don't know if that's an American thing or just a common just guy thing, that when you lose, you're now twice as eager to go into the next battle.
Yep.
It makes you more and more, you want to be there more. At the beginning, you're kind of like, you know what, I can do this. I want to do this for the right reasons, but am I really want to die for this? And then after your first or second or third battle, it gets to the point where you're obsessed with it, and that's all you want to do.
And I'm trying to think of, it was several years ago, I went into a very deep study of Francis Marion and Bannister Tarleton. And it was interesting. They're two different methods of fighting, how they would wage war. And Francis Marion's was, and this is going to be paraphrasing, but what he would say is always leave. And I think, Snapper, you had said that this was Sun Tzu's Art of War. I think it was you or somebody had said that. But he said never completely surround your enemy, because if you give him a chance to run, he'll take it at the first sign of adversity.
Mm-hmm.
And Tarleton's was, I can't remember this off the top of my head, but basically it was look for a sign of weakness and then send your cavalry in as hard and fast as you can, or something like that, which kind of didn't pan out for him very well.
My favorite saying of all time is still "Sir, we're surrounded, and it's perfect. We got the enemy right where we want them."
Yeah, exactly. But
favorite saying of all time.
That's what I think I'd mentioned that sometime. Tarleton really did pull a Custer at Cowpens. We caught him napping, boys.
Yeah.
Oh, nope.
Never mind.
Never mind. Atlatl Man says, love Johnny Tremaine as a kid. All right. Turkey Creek 1823 says there were civilian fowling pieces built one at a time. And then there was the trade guns. Very similar, but trade guns were more cheaply made and imported by the tens of thousands. There you go. And like I said, Turkey Creek is the guy to talk to. I mean, he really knows his stuff on that. Which came first, the English or the French trade gun? I think the French, because the Fusee Detroits were coming out in the late 1600s. Matter of fact, the flintlock mechanism we know and love today is called sometimes the French lock, because that's really where it comes from. The English were still wanting to use a snap-on style. What's your thoughts on that, Rivero 311?
Oh, it's I need to learn more about trade guns.
I'm probably shooting
out of my wheel.
I'm probably shooting myself in the foot there, but I think it's the French.
I would agree with that, because the French, as they had a lower population count in New France, they were more engaged with the natives. They're more, everyone knows they have the deeper alliances. The English sometimes do, not so much.
Yeah. And a lot of that boils down to the reasons for being in North America, I think. Because the French. Go ahead.
Oh, the French are they're commercializing in the furs, and they're in the backwoods. Yeah. And then the English are Jamestown is basically a private military contract company, You have all the Puritans that leave England because of religious reasons. You have the Catholics that go to Maryland. You have Puritans that aren't Puritan enough that go to Rhode Island. So like there's a whole. You have the Dutch, which in New York, and they're trying to do mercantilism.
Yeah.
That word, but yeah, I would assume that the English would be This would be, I guess this. What would you say that? You can make the generalization that the English would be less likely to hand guns to people that they know they're going to be here for. Like, we're expecting to move, like there is progress.
They would eventually, but I always looked at it this way. The French came to North America because of their love for high fashion in Paris, and the best way to get things like felt was from beavers. So they set up trapping routes, and they really weren't here. I mean, yes, they colonized, but they weren't here like the English were, where it was all about God, family, and farms, and land, and land. And that was really kind of the contingency. Wow, that was the wrong word there. That was really kind of the problem that started the French and Indian War. Was because, and that's why the French, I think, lost in the long run, is because they weren't as established. But I like to. Have you ever heard of the lead plate expedition?
Where they just went around and started throwing lead plates up to say, "This is my rank. This is
they
mine."
Just went along the Ohio River. Yep, just everything on this side of the river is part of France.
But no, we have our lead plate. That's.
I think it was John Wayne that said a man should only be allowed to own as much land as he can defend.
Well, the French lost.
The French didn't get the memo on that one.
You need a navy.
Yeah.
Gotta have a navy.
Gotta have a navy. And even on that lead plate expedition, they talked about they're going down the river and they're just seeing English farms popping up on both sides of the rivers. They're trying to claim it all.
Yorktown is there because of a French naval victory. The greatest victory in the American Revolution happens because of the French Navy.
Yep.
So it's always that
fun
fact. And then
it never happened again.
They don't win very many ship-on-ship encounters.
Yeah. No, not after that. Let's see, the Battle of the Nile. No. The Battle of what was the one that happened in the Caribbean, like right after Yorktown?
Is it Battle of the Capes, Battle of the Saints, Battle of Saint?
We had the Battle of the Chesapeake right before Yorktown. They won that one.
And then DeGrasse goes down and loses, like right in 1782.
Immediately.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you got Trafalgar. Yeah, that one didn't turn out too well. I read while I was on those orders, I read Napoleon in Egypt, and I read about the disaster that was the Battle of the Nile. Ooh. The French were painting their ships with flammable paint, and they saw the British warships coming into the harbor at dusk, and they said, don't worry about setting up for battle. They won't attack until morning because we never fight at night. Napoleon was 30 miles away and saw his biggest flagship go up in a giant fireball. I was like, oh, man. Yeah.
Hey, give me a minute, guys. I got to go check something out. There's quite a bit of stuff going out here. I'll be right back. Can you pause or turn off my...
I can mute you. Oh, there we go. Oh, let's see. Yeah. All right. Hardy says something that most people don't talk about much. What would a rifleman's shooting bag setup look like? Did they really string a bunch of stuff from the strap like we do now, only surviving like we do now? Any surviving complete set?
Rifles is such its own cultural, the amount of energy. I don't have an answer. I do French muskets.
Yep, exactly.
that is the rifleman. That's its own subculture in reenacting and history. Like the amount of knowledge it takes. I love muzzle loading. Would probably have a great answer to that.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that one. If you asked me about British muskets, depending on the day of the week, I might be able to, or British rifles, I might be able to answer you. But I'm like you. It's kind of French musket stuff for me. which we haven't talked about a whole lot. Well, we still got some time. We'll talk about some French muskets here in a little bit, get some of these
Oh, no, I
questions
got
answered.
the whole thing. It was the Battle of the Saints. Comte de Grasse goes down and he loses.
Yep.
Or
Yep.
I might need to get going pretty soon, boys. I got a
Okay.
couple things I gotta to fix out there before it breaks or destroys itself.
Antique Gunslinger says he wants to build the earliest version of trade gun Northeast type. He was the one asking about which came first, English or French trade guns. Antique Gunslinger, for that, you would probably have to ask Turkey Creek 1823. Like I said, he knows a lot about trade guns. He's got a YouTube channel. Go check it out. Yeah, he could probably fill you in on that. Let's see here. Soylent Green says, you are so right, Revere. He's like, I reenact Revolutionary War also, and the riflemen are completely different.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're caught up on questions. So let's talk French muskets.
All right. So,
Hey guys, I'm gonna have to probably leave.
Okay.
If I can get back on, I will.
All right.
But yeah, I'm gonna have to get going.
Okay. See ya.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Yeah, you too. Take care, gentlemen. I will try to come back on if I can.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. So
let's go. All right. So I've prepared a lot of notes. I'm very excited about to do this. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yep, no problem.
I spend way too much time looking at this stuff. And anyways, so I'm going to be going over French arms and American independence. It's going to have the American situation, the French situation, the exchange, the war, and the post-war. So we're going to start off with the American situation. 1775, the war begins, and 13 colonies head into war. You can say they stumble into war, and an army has to be created while they're fighting. And you're going to have a lot of problems facing this Continental Army. We're just going to cover them very, very at the 10,000-foot level. You're going to have a lack of equipment. The Continental Army faced severe shortages of essential military supplies, including weapons, ammunition, clothing, and food. They have limited training. They have inadequate funding. Remember, this is the Continental Congress, so they don't really have they're doing taxes by how much taxes do you want to pay, and people don't like that. So
how about none?
It's hard to get money. Thankfully, the French are eager to loan out sufficient funds to finance the army's needs, leading to insufficient funds, leading to difficulties in paying soldiers and purchasing equipment. Logistical challenges. The logistics of supplying and maintaining an army over long distances were challenging, especially, remember, this is 1775, and you're fighting a war on the East Coast of North America. We're going to jump right into it. During the 11-month siege of Boston, in early 1776, George Washington reports that there are nearly 2,000 men without muskets.
Is this the same time whenever he shows up in the camp and he finds the sentries drunk on duty?
This would be a few months after that. George Washington is not a fan of the New England Army that he has now been put in charge of.
Yeah.
But 2,000 men don't have muskets, and it's estimated he has 7,000 to 16,000 men total. So that means 12 to 28% of his men outside of Boston are without arms. During the siege, there were parts where the men had no more than 9 cartridges a man. The British, 60. So he's trying to hold in, he's pieced together, and riflemen are actually there. Riflemen are up there, and they're doing harassing fire. And they're also doing their own thing because riflemen are their own special creatures. But what kind of guns do exist for the Americans at that time? So you have your English pin-style muskets, or you can call them a king's musket, was how George Washington referred to it. These are acquired from various sources, including British supply ships captured by colonial vessels, also when you raid armories, arsenals, weapons pickups. So the next type is French muskets. How many French muskets were there at the beginning of the war? Well, not that many. French Saint-Étienne? I'm gonna have to slow down my talking. Very few were captured during the French and Indian War. When the British captured about 7,000 of these muskets at Quebec, they did not disarm the Quebec militia. There was also very limited trade between British America and French Canada. Even after the British take control of New France, very few French muskets were used in America. They were actually mostly sent to Britain to be used as trade guns. So there, can tie it in with natives in the Canadian provinces, limiting their presence in America. So we're going to look at the act of regulating and disciplining the militia, and we'll look at the Virginia from 1777, something I'm pretty comfortable with. Every non-commissioned officer and private with a rifle and a tomahawk, or a good firelock and bayonet with a pouch and horn, or a cartouche or cartridge box, and 3 charges of powder and ball. That is what the militiaman is required to have. Again, we kind of talked about it earlier, that good firelock. There's nothing about caliber. There's no have it engaged, because they have no way to, you just bring your ball and your powder and you size it to yourself.
So it wasn't like Jamestown, because I thought that was interesting. At Jamestown, they actually had a requirement before coming there that you had to have over 70 caliber. Anything under that was not considered a musket caliber. So that's why they're just like, bring it.
No, that's straight from the 1777 Militia Act. It's basically the same thing in the 1755 Militia Act. So they just no caliber requirements. So you're going to have your guns would be Fowlers, like we talked about, mixed parts militia muskets. I don't know the best way to really describe what these American-sourced mixed parts guns are. Sometimes you just hear them referred to as militia muskets. And then your rifles are going to be limited by geography. Rifles are pretty much connected to hunting. They're more in your western, closer to the Appalachia, Virginia, western Pennsylvania, North Carolina. George Washington in October of 1775 writes, "In the manufacturing of arms for public use, great care should be taken to make the bores the same size." This is awesome. I found this quote recently. George Washington says we need to have the same caliber of muskets, that the same ball may answer, and otherwise great disadvantage may arise from a mixture of cartridges. These are the things you have to have in your brain housing group when you're in charge of supplying an entire army, is these minute details that become very prevalent very early on. So colonial efforts for arms production. So there's limited production capabilities within the colonies that were utilized. Local gunsmiths would receive orders to make guns, and also from orders of committees of public safety. To meet the increasing demand for arms, states and the Continental Congress centralized storage and repair facilities. They also created arsenals in Pennsylvania, Maryland, New York, and Virginia. Just for example, I was able to find out Maryland had 12 shops and can produce 240 muskets a month. So
wow.
keep that number in mind, because I'm going to be talking about musket production throughout this whole thing, and you're going to be blown away by how many muskets the French produce. Benjamin Franklin proposed to the Pennsylvania Assembly to engage in musket production within the colonies. He does this in August of 75, suggesting the acquisition of 2,000 muskets annually for 10 years. So that's not going to make it fun. But this is an interesting part that comes from this Ben Franklin quote. "I intend, therefore, to propose to our assembly to give the encouragement here by engaging to take 2,000 muskets per annum for 10 years, all right, at a good price. Well, I doubt not will in that time establish the manufacturer among us, and an arsenal with 20,000 good firelocks in it." That's because the hardest piece to make is the firelock, is the lock. So they can source the stocks, they can source the bands, and you'll kind of see through this arsenal process, they actually have thousands of individual pieces scattered around repair facilities, and they put them together. One of the America's U.S. government contracts from the late 1790s, they just buy thousands of locks from Ketland in England, and they're French style locks that are bought from England, but they just want the locks. You get the locks over here, we can make the stock, we can do the barrels, we can blow enough barrels in proofing to get something, so we'll be fine with that. So Benjamin Franklin says we should do this to other colonies as well, starting that whole process of bringing all 13 colonies in together, starting to create those united colonies that would become the United States. In September of 1775, the Second Continental Congress, the Secret Committee, so that's basically like a spy ring, they have import goals. We're going to import 46-pounder brass cannon, 20,000 musket locks, 10,000 stands of good arms. It's going to be paid for by the Continental Congress. Then they're going to be, we will provide to Europeans, we'll give them produce. It's going to be tobacco, rice, but we will not give them hogs, cattle, sheep, or poultry. We're going to try to keep that here in America. We're not trying to hand away the things that we can use to sustain an army. And by 1775, state governments and Continental Congress began issuing contracts for arms production. So that's the American situation. Again, stumbled into a war. We're now at war. All right, let's start grabbing stuff. So what's happening on the other side of the Atlantic? The French. They lost the 7 Years' War.
Yep.
And they lost nearly all of their land claims in North America, and trading interests in India under the Treaty of Paris. One of many treaties of Paris. So they start to begin in 1763 to arm their army with, this is where we're getting into the French muskets, a model of 1763.
The Stainville.
That's in the year. The French arms production was centralized as, you're going to have to tell me what this is, in Maubeuge, Charleville, and you can do the same. I don't know.
Saint-Etienne.
Artisanal workshops under contract divided the production, and final assembly was centralized in Maubeuge and Charleville's Royal Armories. In Saint-Etienne, muskets were assembled by contractors. So two of them, even though they are royal arsenals, two of them, Saint-Etienne is using contractors for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And that's when we're going to enter Monsieur de Montabiliard, who's going to be, he's basically, him and de Greuval, they don't mesh. I don't know.
No.
But yeah, he shows up in order to lighten the infantry's weapons. So they come out with the 1763. They want to have a sturdy, reliable gun, and it's just too.
They want a light gun.
Yeah. And now they're just like, nah, we want a light gun because this thing is way too heavy. So Montbéliard, and this actually comes from that French book I bought from that gentleman that told me to get it. That I'm trying to translate. Saw fit to adopt the dragoon musket they had just developed for the infantrymen. So they took that, and that is going to lead into creating the 1766. This artisanal process was strained to meet demand, but it exceeded the capacity of any other system. The Royal Inspector of Manufacturers described Saint-Etienne in 1778. The whole town, he wrote, is shrouded in coal smoke that penetrates everywhere. He estimates that 30,000 people live and work around Saint-Etienne. All of them are occupied at the forge. Men, women, children, boys, girls, armor,
the dogs, the cats.
Ironmongers, metal workers of all sorts. You cannot have any idea for the number of forges and their activity. These are the true dens of Vulcan. And these are the production numbers. 1763, 88,000 guns. 1766 to 69, 140,000 guns. 1770 to 1774, I've gotten mixed numbers on this. So we're going to say 80 to 200,000 guns. I've heard conflicting numbers.
I heard 77,000. So
I've seen 77,000.
Yep.
I've seen, so these numbers need to get really fleshed out.
Yeah.
73, you have 29,000. 74, you have 66,000. And then 1777 is too late for us. We're
not going that far, even though it's a great year.
So remember, 240 a month at Maryland. All right, so it's just a state. Or how's America do? In 1810, Harper's Ferry is making 10,000 a year.
Yep.
So
I gotta mention something here. Garrett has read, and I don't know if I'd mentioned this to you yet or not, but Garrett had read. He's been reading Springfield books day and night for the Springfield Trapdoor, obviously. And we talked about Honoré Blanc, right?
Yeah.
The guy who helps develop the 1774, the 73. No, not 73, not 73, not the not that one. The 74 though, and I had mentioned in my 1777 video that he had disappeared and I didn't know where he went because I couldn't find any more information about him after that, especially during the years of the Revolution. Garrett is reading his Springfield book, and evidently Honoré Blanc was very good friends with this guy I'm sure nobody's ever heard of called Thomas Jefferson. And he comes to the United States and he is tasked with setting up 2 armories. He sets one up in the style of Saint Etienne and one in the style of Charleville. The one is for mass production and one is for experimental, well, not necessarily experimental, but trying to advance technology of the guns. The one he designed for mass production based off of Saint Etienne was set up at Springfield, and the one based off of Charleville was set up at Harper's Ferry.
Oh, okay.
So
I need to know this because Harper's Ferry is my other half of the collection. So
yeah. Anyhow, carry on. I just thought that was an amazing piece of information Garrett dug out of that Springfield book. I was like, hey, that finishes the story.
We'll have to come back and talk about the interchangeability of parts because everybody said they did it, but who actually did it, that's a whole different
I got some information on that too, about Springfield and French, American and French interchangeability of parts. But anyhow, continue. Charlie Mike.
Okay. So they come out and they have this new model 1766. And then they're like, well, we have all these 1763s that we just made, so we're just going to lighten them. So they're going to take that same block plate, they're going to lighten the barrel and lighten the stock. But it's going to be called a 1763. They're also known as the Stanville muskets, and they're also sent to Leger Arsenal was developed to address the weight issues of these. These can be called the 1763 light, and then you have your 1763 heavies. Or, as Pedersoli likes to sell theirs, they have a 1763 Leger/66 that don't exist online, and then they only exist in kits. So
I like their 1766, which is heavily, maybe pun intended, heavily inspired on the 1766 heavy or 63 heavy.
Yeah, I know, and I want one. I want one.
I do
so
too.
bad. But they don't. There is a kit on hanging out.
Yeah,
I don't know say where it's at.
Yeah.
Right. So Monsieur de Montbéliard, he's the inspector of the factory Saint Etienne. He played that key role in reducing the weight. So these are some information I actually pulled from that French book, which, how do I say it? Arms a few Francis models de ordonnance system 1763-266. Should I present these? It's just a couple pictures of the locks. If you want to look at it.
Okay,
How's
I don't
that?
know how quite do that.
It says I can present.
Okay.
Don't worry. Or if I share my screen. We won't worry about it because I don't want to mess it up. But I have close-up photos of those locks. And the interesting thing about it is that it actually has the different barrels. So we now know what a 1763-66, a 70.71, a 73, and a 74 barrel are, not because of the bayonet lug, but because of the anti-rotation lug that is underneath the barrel. So we can now accurately date these musket barrels, which I need to go back and take apart my original and see what I think it's a 70 barrel. But anyways, so that
anti-rotation lug.
Anti-rotation lug.
Is that what they call the bayonet lug?
No. So they have. I'm looking at the 1773. I'll send this to you on something else, but they have two anti-rotation lugs. Literally just a lug under the barrel, not a bayonet lug.
They must have quit doing that around because, well, I know my AN9 doesn't have it, or the 79.
No. So the 63 has it. The 66 has it. The 70-71 does not have it. The 73 has it. The 74 has one only at the end near the bayonet lug.
So that's something else I'm going to have to put on my 66.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to
you're going to brazen it on. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, like I said, I'm building a 74, which I'm actually fairly close with being done on. I've actually got the lock and everything built up.
Oh, wow. Where did you get the lock from?
What's that?
Where did you get a lock from?
So I got a parts kit from the rifle shop, and I got the lock castings from them, and I actually built the lock from the castings.
Whoa.
And it's
awesome.
It's fast. It is a very fast lock. One thing I'll say, though, I've noticed from handling my AN9 and my 79 is I've noticed that I actually ordered another mainspring because I'm going to try to stretch it a little bit because I noticed that the spring tension is a little light for what I'm expecting out of that French musket. I'm expecting that
Yeah.
Rack it back. But anyhow, all right. Sorry, I keep interrupting you, but I keep on
No, it's
thinking about
fine.
things.
I need to slow down how fast I
No,
talk.
you're good. It's good
Uh,
information.
No, it's been great to share it. So, despite being referred to as the light, it was actually heavier than the model 1754 musket that it was meant to replace, and that is just every government contract I've ever heard of. Hey, we
Yep.
can do this better, faster, quicker, and it didn't happen. Uh, we'll skip over some of the. Most of this is just the dimensions. I didn't know if we needed that. So the muskets can have iron mountings with a brass front sight brazed at the top of the rear ring of the front barrel band. That's always good to look for. Always make sure that has a brass front sight post. If not, it could be a replacement.
If not,
The
it's probably
French
from the rifle shop because they just cast off of the mold or they cast off of one. So I've got to
I have
actually cut mine off and put brass on there.
I have an American Charlottesville video coming out this weekend that you can enjoy, and that is a actual Charlottesville that has a front sight post that is not brass. But I'll leave the rest of it. It was another mistake that we can always learn from.
Yeah.
The French Royal Navy utilized this musket as well, with iron furnishings replaced by cast brass to resist oxidation effectively. So if you see brass on barrel bands, just think Marine or Navy.
Or if it has
Imperial Guards, so I guess don't listen to me because.
Or if it has an iron middle barrel band that's split. Colonial fruit musket.
And you can buy it, and you can just snag it for $1,000.
Yeah.
Get that. Just.
Also, you get a free 1766 bayonet and original frog and scabbard with it too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, lucky. All right. Officers' muskets were made from selected figured walnut and were lighter in weight compared to those intended for regular troops. So we would refer to those as a fusil. The French refer to all of their muskets as fusils, but the fusil for us, and I think the English they have the Fusiliers, is a lighter musket. An officer fusil is the same sort of thing, a lighter musket. They don't want it to get banged around. And then. So that's basically the 1766 system. We're going to come back to this. I want to get through the whole story first because I know we can just sit here and talk 66s. French military downsizing after the 7 Years' War contrasted with France's robust army and modernization efforts, leading to the surplus of muskets that are being able to be sold to the American colonists. At the same time that this is happening, our favorite, the one and only Grubevall, is modernizing artillery. He introduces standardized artillery pieces, improved gun carriages, and new methods for organizing and deploying artillery units. And he would go on to revolutionize that. So what you need to know is that he's basically up and coming from the artillery branch, and Montbéliard is in the musket, and they kind of get swapped out. So if you're ever wondering why is there so many just variations, is because these two men have a lot of personality, is what I can pick up from the books, and they keep getting in and out. So they come in and they want to change something. Yeah. Grubevall wins in the end. He becomes famous, and then he dies conveniently right when the revolution begins. We don't know.
Yeah. Something I was going to add to that, you're mentioning artillery making muskets. If you read into French muskets and the development of them, you're going to notice a trend, and that is most of the designs, at least the decent ones, are by artillery officers. Also, by the way, there's actually a Gribevall gun. That's an artillery piece that's actually called the Gribevall gun. I think Hearn Iron Works makes a replica.
So Grubevall, he lightens the barrel and the chassis.
Yep.
So is it because they're better with the metal working? They understand the metal working? Because I'm assuming.
I know he has the code of. I cannot think of the year. I don't have my books here with me. I think it's the code of 1777. I think where he actually lays out in the regulation for the metal has to be of this quality, the wood has to be of this quality, everybody has to be of this quality. But yeah, so the Gribevall gun, I'm trying to remember here. I saw I saw a picture of one not too long ago. It's a little different looking cannon. It actually looks like an older one, but yeah, he designed a artillery piece that bears his name. But yeah,
He's infamous on YouTube these
Yes.
last 4 months.
Yeah, and that
We both came out with videos like within.
and I felt bad about it because I made my video. I was like, man, nobody talks about this Gribabal guy. I was like, nobody talks about this 1777, and then I go and I look back, and I don't think at that time I didn't know you made YouTube videos.
No,
And I went, and sometimes I'll see people comment on the channel. I'll click on their channel and see if they're running one too. And I clicked on yours, and I was like,
no, it's good.
And
No,
I'm like,
it's great.
the
It's been
1777. I was like,
timed perfectly.
beat me by like a week.
Well, it was a mystery musket because yeah.
Yeah.
So that is the French situation, and now we're going to move into the war. This is the interesting part. This is going to include that shell company. So Louis XVI approves the setup of Roderick, Hortalez, and company to provide munitions for America. And just to kind of end about the French, tax revenues for the French was 500 million livres in 1780. France had spent 1.3 billion livres by the time the war ends.
Yep.
They are spending almost 3 times the amount of tax revenue.
And
And it's not just the tax revenue, it's the interest. And also, America, we default and we don't pay back. So
it sounds. What did they get out of it? They got a whole lot of nothing because they're
Yeah.
like, well, at least they won't be. We showed them British what for.
and
The
then,
Americans definitely wouldn't start trading with them again,
yeah, we were trading
like in
with them.
1784.
Yeah, literally
Like,
right
the
out the
year,
gate.
yeah. Anyhow,
So, but that's in the future. This is 1775. It's the summertime, and Francis's foreign minister Vergennes has observed with great interest the troubles that is happening to British with their American colonies. And really early on, covert agreements were made for the shipment of arms, munitions, and supplies from France to America, facilitated by financial aid and secret agreements. In 1776, in the spring of 1776, Louis XVI gave his French foreign minister Vergennes approval for, you're going to like this guy, Beaumarchais. Beaumarchais to set up a commercial firm, Roderick, Hortalez, and Co. to provide munitions for the Americans with money to buy them.
just started reading about that in the.
Yeah. So he was
Definitely
in London.
wasn't a shady
Yeah.
deal.
No, he was like
We're not giving guns to
in
the
London.
Americans.
Yeah, he was hunting. He was trying to hunt down somebody that was dressing in woman's clothes, acting like Louis XVI, and he was trying to like get back into court. He's a whole character. But so we're gonna have our key people now. For the Americans, you're gonna have Silas Deane, Arthur Lee, and Benjamin Franklin. For the French, you're gonna have Louis XVI, Vergennes, and then Beaumarchais. So in 1766, in June, I need to stop saying so. Roderick, Hortalez and Company was set up for that French import-export, Spanish in name only, because, if it's a Spanish name, we're not doing it.
Yeah, it reminds me of that scene from Lord of War.
Yeah.
What do you have on here? You have 500,000 rounds of submachine gun ammunition. I'm hunting. Trigger happy.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, go ahead.
And off the bat, the French are going to loan 1 million livres, and then the Spanish, because the Spanish are going to loan another 1 million livres, and then there's going to be another 1 million livres raised from French merchants. This is 1776. This is before America's even declared independence. The French, like Snapper was talking about, when you get beat, you want to come back and fight. I was thinking about this the whole time. The French want to. They need that payback, and they're going to get it. So this is the public story they're going to go with. So we create this company, right? And the public story was that the Hortalez agents would use these funds to hire ships and buy military supplies in France for shipment and sale to neutral merchants in the Caribbean. While there, Hortalez agents would use the money made selling arms to buy tobacco and rice for the American farmers. This produce would be brought back to France and sold to help repay the investors for the startup funding. Beaumarchais would keep any gain and bear any loss. France is going to it's going to be French arms on French ships with French money. This plan.
That doesn't sound familiar.
Yeah, no. So it's basically everything but the guys holding the guns. But we'll get to that. Yeah, there's no correlation.
Then there's a few of them even.
Yeah, they'll come in later. and this was going to be around a couple islands, but the Dutch controlled the island of St. Eustace. The Americans could pretend to buy the arms there, and the U.S. vessels would then transport them to the U.S. with their own ships. Unfortunately, one of Silas Deane's colleagues was actually a British spy, so the British were fully aware of the scheme, even learning many of the ports and sailed. So Colonel Arkady Gluckman writes United States muskets, rifles, and carbines. I should have found a way to present this, but it'll get presented later. And he actually tracks down every single ship, where they went, the date of arrival, how many muskets they offloaded. So he said in February of 76, you have 3,000 guns that go to Connecticut. You get 10,000 guns before 77. Everyone kind of talks about spring of 77 is when the first French muskets. This is actually pretty common knowledge. Everyone's just like, oh, French muskets don't show up until 77. He actually has at least around 10,000 French muskets are brought in between February of 76 to November of 76. Not as many as 30,000 that are dropped off in Portsmouth and Philadelphia, but it's still a large number. And then the numbers keep going throughout the year. So well over 100,000 French arms were imported during the War of Independence for the Continental troops, Navy, and militia. The average price paid for these French muskets was 24 livres, approximately to $5 per musket. Now we're going to compare.
Isn't that where Benjamin Franklin had mentioned he was like, even if we only got half the shipment, we're coming out.
Oh, we're coming
paraphrasing,
out.
man. We're coming out real good.
That whole paragraph from that book, that's the French Arms in Colonial America book. That whole paragraph just kind of set me off on this, because it's like, what? So it's costing us $5 to import these from across the Atlantic Ocean. If we wanted to make them,
included.
Yeah, shipping and handling included. And also, we're not even paying for it with our money. We're paying for it with loans. American
that we're not
made
gonna
arms.
pay back.
Yeah, that we're gonna. Sorry, France. American-made arms obtained by contract average about $12.30. So you're almost getting 2.5 guns, French guns, for having your own guns made here in the States. And then these guns were also borrowed with money purchased from France. And now we're going to get to that amazing quote. Benjamin Franklin adds in the postscript of April 1777, "We have purchased 80,000 fusils, a number of pistols, etc., of which the enclosed is the account for 220,000 livres. They were king's arms in second hand, but so many of them are unused and exceptionally good that we esteemed it was a great bargain if half of them should arrive." So it was just like, hey, whatever, if we can get half of them, we'll be very happy. So yeah, so that is how the guns are brought in. Now, you want to talk about anything before I move into the war?
Yeah, so why these guns? I'll talk a little bit about this one, I guess. Why would these guns be unused for the most part? For the most part, they're 63s to 66s, right?
Yep.
And 70s, you're going to see. Well, I don't think they get the 74s are later shipments.
Yeah,
they don't get
limited number.
Yeah, very limited numbers. A lot of them go actually to the Swiss Guard 74s. But the 63s, 66s, you know your history. There's not a whole lot going on as far as war in France in the 1760s. There's this big development pattern that's coming along, and we get to 1777, and there's a new musket that is awesome that comes out in 1777, and the French are like, we're standardizing on this gun, and they're like, we really don't need all the older models anymore. So as they're making more newer 1777s, they're selling off their old surplus, or sending off their old surplus. We're borrowing it without the intent of return. And so the 1777 is funny because, like we mentioned, let's go through the models. The more popular ones, we got 1717. Actually, technically, you got the 1716, which was not standardized, but you have the 1716, the 1717, 1728, the 1746, 1754, the 1763, the 1766, the 1768, kind of. 1770, 73, 74, and the 75 and 76. I kind of lump in with the 74, but all of these different models are not interchangeable with a new one.
Yep, I
So
was
they
about
all
to
just
go.
get
Yep.
sent off.
No, I mean exactly to build off of that, and you would think like, why would you get away? Why would you hand off 140,000 muskets? It's because the locks are different, the
Yep.
lock plates are different, the band like it's taking up space in a way. Like yeah, they
And-
shoot the same caliber, so that's fine, but through a long duration
Yeah.
war, here's a great stat I just found out. During the War of 1812, America lost 250,000 muskets.
Yep.
So it's just like that turnover rate is just like that's the pieces, the problems, the maintenance. So yeah, that's why that 1777 is so important.
And at
What
this
probably
time
wouldn't-
frame, the French are very, very into interchangeable parts. And so at that point, it really doesn't make any sense to have all these different models.
Yeah, and you can just use it to thumb the British. So
Yep.
it's just a win-win. It's a win-win for everybody.
You would think it would be a win-win, but here in about, let's see, you're what year are you at now? You're at 76, 86.
No.
Yeah, in about 13, 14 years, it's not much of a
Yeah.
win-win anymore.
Hey,
France.
1783 was a very good year. So anything that the
1783,
bill
1789,
thumbs thing.
1789, not so much.
That's where we get to drop off though, because we're Americans, so we can just
Yeah.
So
Anyhow,
let's
Continue.
okay. All right, so now we're in the warriors, and this is the part that's just interesting for infantry guys, non-infantry guys, military, because like how does this operate? And I did get research help from Jim Gallagher. He's the gentleman that works at the museum in Yorktown. So how do you outfit the army? Well, it's kind of pulling from the militia system a little bit. Recruits often brought their own muskets when enlisting, and they were allowed to keep them upon discharge. So they might have showed up with an English musket and left with a French musket.
Okay, just one more thing. I'm sorry to keep interrupting you.
Yeah, no, you're good.
You read Joseph Plum Martin's book?
I'm
sure you
working
have.
my way through it. I've skimmed it. What is that mile-long shot that is taken at the
That was what I was going to get.
Yeah, I
And
need
dear
to.
reader, that
Yeah.
shot was taken at, as sure as I live and breathe, that shot was taken at over a mile.
Yeah.
That musket.
And he said it was like a 14-inch or 14-foot barrel or something. No one's talked about it. It's just sitting out there. If you want anything to do with history, the American Revolution is so undercovered. Come
Yeah.
reenact. Get
That poor
involved.
redcoat picking apples a mile away, getting shot by a 14-foot long smoothbore musket.
Yeah, it was. And it's just like such a one-off comment in his diary there. Just
Yeah.
like, what? How is this a thing? Like, how is this not talked about?
That
Setting.
That and the part where he talks about the Thanksgiving feast were the two that just got me as an infantryman.
Yeah.
I was just chuckling so hard at the Thanksgiving feast. Congress gave us this huge Thanksgiving feast. Dear reader, would you like to know what it was? It was like a half a
problem-
gill of rice and a little bit of rum.
The problem was he was educated and he could
Yeah.
write. I think
Yeah.
he was a private the whole time.
Yep. Okay, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No, you're good.
You mentioned troops bringing their own muskets, and that immediately popped into my head.
So this is where it's going to get pretty funny, because you would think, oh, they bring their own musket, that's a good thing, like, oh, they're self-supplying. But if you know anyone that has firearms, they very much are close to said firearms.
Yeah.
Early in the war, Washington orders that no soldier upon the expiration of their term of enlistment was able to take with them any serviceable gun. If the musket was his private property, it would be appraised and he would be given the full value of it. Let's forget the fact that the Continental dollar, due to inflation, basically plummets and becomes useless, and the Continental Army is rarely paid on time, and you're having mutiny problems all the way until January in the spring of 1781.
Yep.
And finances are a problem. So when Washington's like, I got an IOU in Continental dollars, surprise, he was very upset. People did not listen to it. They would walk off with their guns. And then this was these. So
marking 'em.
so there's part where the state of Massachusetts gets French guns, and the state allowed the militiamen to buy the guns. And Washington's like, no, we cannot have these people thinking this is property of the U.S. Congress, right? Like it's going to be U.S. government property, and there is that through line. Washington threatens to stop the last 2 months of pay due to a soldier if he walks away with his musket.
All them French muskets just walking away.
It's just they just grab, they're off, just floating away. So that's just kind of a fun aside I was reading just earlier today. So the first big batch comes into Portsmouth. So we're now let's talk more about the war years during the war. 34,000 were brought in that spring of 1777. They're intended for the Continental Army, but due to General Johnny Burgoyne marched down towards Fort Ticonderoga, many of those muskets were actually diverted to the New England militias. That totaled almost 9,000 militiamen who reinforced Gates at Saratoga. The French muskets really don't start to get to the Continental Army until the Army enters Valley Forge, December of 77 to 78. And prior to the Battle of Monmouth, there was very few, if any, French muskets in use by either side in the American Revolutionary War. So this is where the three pillars is kind of important of your captured pin style, your locally sourced guns, and your French guns. So I had originally, from my comparison video, I sell too much. So if I could go back and take some words out of a video, I'd do that. So we have to remember that's the three pillars that's holding up that stool. But they do become more prevalent, and sooner or later they will be in majority. So they come out more use in the later part of the war. The Philadelphia Supply Agency is a really interesting kind of aside. After the British evacuated Philadelphia in 1778, France sent large quantities of arms and components to America, and the majority of them arrived in Philadelphia. These shipments were sorted, refurbished, and placed in storage as raw materials for gunsmiths who worked at repairing and stocking into complete arms, including Joseph Perkins, IP. It's not confirmed that he's IP, but we with confidence can say maybe it's IP.
Yeah.
So they have just barrel bands, locks, barrels, stocks, and this book behind me, U.S. Military Flintlocks, Early Years, Peter A. Schmidt, has all the different pieces, side plates. They take the whole gun apart, and it sounds like they just put them in barrels, and you just take the gunsmith goes, and then they have to go and hand fit everything. Yep. So there's just pieces hanging out inside these agencies.
I believe you're talking about IP. I marked my Indian-made gun, Old Shar, my 63-66.
Beautiful.
I marked it. Thanks. I marked it IG, and I remember I believe that was John Gallet. Same.
John Gallet?
Yep. Same establishment and everything. But yeah,
those markings are hard because I have IOC or ICC on my side plate for my French musket. And I don't know. I've seen things that say it seems to be Americans would mark it, but it could also be a personal brand. And I wish they would have just had a certificate they wrapped in the barrel.
Yeah.
Just like sent from.
Hey, write this down and put it in the stock. I'm still trying to figure out whose name is on the side of my 1779.
Yeah, I can't spell that. I was trying to.
It was like I think it's Tankul, or something like that. However you'd say that in French.
Yeah.
Tankul.
Speaking of marks, though, so we're gonna do the marking. So Washington has this problem with people just five-finger discounting all this government stuff.
Tactically acquired.
He's not a fan. He's also not a fan of heavy drinking. He doesn't like drunkards.
Yeah.
So this is where the markings come in. Increase accountability and reduce the theft of continental property. Commanding officers were instructed to ensure compliance with the order with brands available from the commissary of the military. The decision in spring of 1777 to mark all continental arms with the letters U.S. And this is where it gets a little Schmidt. Basically, the most of your markings you're going to see are U states, United States. Mm-hmm. Towards the end of the war, actually like 82, 83, they might start stamping U.S. on the lock plate. So that's technically the war because the war ends in 83. Yorktown's in 81, but the war goes till 83.
Yeah.
But after the war, in that interwar year, 83 to 94, you do see U.S. marked horizontally, vertically, and also on the barrel. So that is your property mark to the U.S. government. Anyone that's been around any modern military
They
firearm,
still do it.
they still do it. Property U.S.
of
government.
U.S. government. Yep.
So next, if you're still in and you look at yours, just think like, oh, I know. Just pull that pub trivia out to your
SI.
CM. Yeah. Hey, sir.
SI check. I lost my knots.
Yeah, especially if you're a new guy, definitely go to your squad leader and tell them something.
Yeah.
Some units branded muskets with marked barrels and bayonets with regimental company numbers. That's not as common as with the British muskets. The only ones I've really seen with this is New Hampshire. New Hampshire marks their barrels or stocks. Maryland, I've seen markings, but the British muskets, it seems like they have much more prominence in tracking unit history, whatever that's worth. So by 1779 onwards, this is where we can start to say, so the latter half of the war, the majority of muskets used by the Continental troops were French muskets. 1781, just random, just to give you an example, 4,000 French muskets were sent to the Southern Army before and after the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. They came from Philadelphia. So these storage facilities are kind of scattered around, and when needed, they send them out. And they give out French infantry muskets to militia at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, which I found was kind of interesting. So they have enough muskets to go around that by that time, they even have enough muskets for the militia to have it.
Yep. So something that I had read, and this was in my reading for the 1774, was that you were talking about the storehouses. They would have so many muskets set out, and then as needed, issue them out. I had read that they would do this they were like, okay, we're going to use the older style of what we have the most of, which is obviously the 66. We're going to use those first, and then we'll move on to the limited amount of 70s, 73s, and 74s, which is why there's not actually a whole lot of 1770. I mean, there are some. There's not a whole lot of 1774s used by American troops during the Revolution. And then after the war, whenever the U.S. government is in dire straits because they're broke, they actually sell off a lot. They standardize on the 66 and sell off the 74s as surplus. So you actually see more 74s as coming out what was then West, Kentucky, Tennessee, places like that as fouling pieces than you do in the war.
I need to confirm if I have a 73 or 74 cock on mine because it's reinforced and it's rounded, but I don't.
I think you would have a 74 or a 70 because the 73 they went back to the flat.
Oh, okay.
Flat cock.
Of course they would. Why wouldn't they?
I have a 1754 cock on that came on that 1779 just sitting over there at the shelf on a shelf at my house.
Hey, you have all the pieces.
Oh yeah, and I'll tell you this: it doesn't work very well with the 1779 lock.
Yeah, that was a good fix you did.
Oh yeah.
I was sending you the proofing stuff. I was reading about how they proofed barrels, and I was like, man, as long as you didn't submerge it underwater and leave it outside, you can generally gauge.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was kind of funny because you're already preemptively getting ahead of the comments that were gonna come because you were shooting a gun. It was just like, I'm doing this for a reason.
For a reason, yes. And before I let you go, I'll let you get back to it. That interchangeability of parts, I think, is funny because I had people telling me you can't. They're like, it's a lock, stock, and barrel are the only parts that are interchangeable. And I'm just sitting there. I'm like, because I took it apart and I was cleaning. I was like, I wonder. A9 mainspring. Wow, what do you know? Fits right in there. 1774 trigger spring, right in there. Interchangeable.
That's also negated by the whole fact that they had the Philadelphia Supply Agency that was just building guns. It's recorded. So
yeah.
I
But
don't.
anyhow, okay. I'm sorry. I keep interrupting
No.
you. I just keep getting. I get talking about this stuff. And I get excited about it. Oh, Gray Pilgrim's in. Howdy,
No.
Gray.
So, deliberate attempts were made to convert entirely to French muskets, but even by the war's end, some English muskets were still in use.
Mhm.
English muskets continued to be used with the Continental Army after Yorktown. Yeah, and they're still in the arsenals, in the inventory. They have them called English muskets. And we talked about by the late 1790s, the U.S. Navy's like, we need brass-mounted guns for the Marine Corps because these guns are lasting like a year at sea. So speaking of that late war sort of consolidation, this was a question I had, is like, well, if I have a French musket and you have an English musket, how is this done? Because they do ammo supply at like a brigade level. So you have your cartridge box. You might have cartridges in your knapsack or your haversack. And then they would have wagons with resupplies. So actually at the brigade, so like it's, you want to standardize as much as you can. Initially, this type of musket consolidation was at the company level, later becoming a regimental and then a divisional level. And then thankfully, we have so much stuff about George Washington online thanks to National Archives. You can Control F and go to National Archives and just see what he has to say about it.
Yeah.
George Washington directed brigade officers to report different calibers and the number of each kind of arm in their brigade. And then the brigade and the division would swap muskets. Caliber issues were evident in officer and quartermaster records, leading to efforts to consolidate muskets of the same caliber within units.
That makes
And
sense.
then, yeah, I mean, it all makes sense, right? It just clicks. It clicks. Like, why would you don't want to deal with the logistics tail if you can cut it down a little bit. Commanding
Poor farm
officers
boys that brought their own guns.
yeah, and walked off the. And that's kind of funny because that's like at the end of the war, and George Washington at the beginning of the war is just like, we are having issues with these gauges. Commanding officers were instructed to ensure compliance with the order and with brands available from the commissary of the military. So that is the war, and now I have the post-war, which I think I'll just keep going if you're fine with that. And just
Go ahead. I got some questions and stuff coming up here. I'll let you finish up here, and then I'll get to them.
Okay.
iPod Walker. iPod Walker was asking something. We'll get to those in a little bit. I'll let Rivero 311 finish up here.
We'll just wrap it up so we can put it in a box and put it away.
Yep. Big
so
old bow.
Post-war, the guns are turned in. Basically, the army is disbanded. George Washington resigns his commission. The war's over. We won. Awesome. Great for us. France, sorry, we're not going to pay that. In 1794, Secretary of War Henry Knox advocates for the possession of 100,000 arms in the arsenal for national security. And what's happening in 1794? Why all of a sudden, like, hey, we need to start getting stuff. We need to start getting some guns.
I wonder what's going to happen in 1795.
Yeah. Everyone's gonna go. Well, we have a couple of reasons. We're going to have St. Clair's defeat, which was the greatest American loss to the Native American forces throughout all of American history. They should make a movie about that, I guess. And then France and Europe is going through revolutions and war. And America is just like, oh, we probably can't import from France anymore as much as we used to if we needed to in a pinch. And also, it's a new government, so we're not paying you. April 1790, which is true. We told French. Yeah, we told the French, like, no, we made that money we owed, that was to the king. That wasn't to this new Republican government. No,
hey, we give you the gift of liberty.
We'll get you back in a couple world wars.
Yeah, do with it what you will.
In April 1794 was the first attempt by the United States to manufacture muskets domestically, and they're going to do it via contract. Secretary of War Henry Knox requests delivery of a French patterned musket to Tench Coxe in 1795. He's the purveyor of public supplies. This is where I'm not going to die on the hill. If you want to start changing naming nomenclatures, I think we should. It'd be good. But at the same time. Anyways,
Well,
this is where Charleville comes from.
That's what I was getting ready to say.
This is where an
Technically-
actual Charleville is first referenced.
Of Charleville
If anyone can find a Revolutionary War era primary source, I would like to see it, because then I'm open to changing. But I can't find it, and I'm just interested. So if you can find Charleville being used, please send it to me, and I'll change, and I'll walk it back. The 7,000 muskets were to be modeled after the French arms, is the actual wording from the letter. Pickering is your Secretary of War at the time.
Mhm.
So 1794, Congress gives George Washington the powers to create two arsenals. You have Springfield Arsenal and Harper's Ferry. And so in 1795, Springfield makes 245 muskets. How much do you think they're spending to make an individual musket in 1795?
I need Garrett in here for this one, because we've talked about this while feeding cattle a bit. And go ahead and tell me, and then I got something to talk about on
Well,
this.
the number is going to range. So $49.37. $49.
So go ahead.
Just for contemporary concerns, they're making $49. It's hard to do the adjusting for inflation compared to the $12 in the Revolution or the $5 for French.
Mhm.
But they do have the worksmen, the men that work there, their pay. Then their pay, the most paid man was $26 a month. That's pretty.
Yep.
By 1796, they're making it for $14. By 1797, they're making it for $10.87. By 1798, they're making it for $21. 1799, they're making it.
It was that
for
different
$15.
stamp you had to do for.
They had that different stamp. They had the one stamp.
Turn it sideways.
So I'm not a Springfield guy. I just do French muskets and Harper's Ferry. Harper's Ferry is the other arsenal that's built. It has to be built, and it starts producing in. There's one musket that's made in the year 1800, but it starts producing in 1801.
Yeah.
This is where we're going to get in the naming nomenclature. We're just going to wrap it up with this. Timothy Pickering was the Secretary of War. He suggested that the Charleville be adapted as the pattern of arm to be made at the National Armories in December of 1795.
Charleville pattern.
The Charleville pattern.
Yep.
These are more commonly known as on auctions and everything else as the Model 1795. These are actual Charlevilles. These are the guns that were referred to as Charlevilles. They're going to be made until 1816 for Springfield and about 1819 through 1816 at Harper's Ferry.
Mm-hmm.
When they're making these guns, they're just known as Charlevilles. And then here's some more quotes on that. Such muskets are as manufactured after the model of the French arms, which comprise by far the greatest part of those in our magazines. For this reason, we have decided that these are the ones that are preferable known to the U.S. We are seeing a supply was not to be expected from France for more French muskets. And the situation of the United States not rendering the measure. I don't know. Let's see. Happening.
I wonder what's going on in 1795.
6,
yeah.
An immediate indispensable.
You don't want those French muskets at that time period.
No, they're going to blow up. And probably what mine is just a random piece of parts. So why the 1766? Not the most advanced musket. But the U.S. could duplicate the manufacturing of it, and they could have the ability to duplicate a sufficient number of reliable Charleville patterns. Remember, they're trying to get to 100,000 guns and make them readily available for a conflict. First, you're going to do is you're going to learn the art of manufacturing a musket, and we're going to learn the Charleville first, and then we will go on to improve the design. We talked about this earlier, so I'll just kind of. Decius Wadsworth says the oldest French musket he knows of is a 1746, 63, a 66, a 68. That one threw me for a loop because I need to go and correct that on my old video because it's been under my impression. What you read is that they don't refer to a 1768 as its own thing. The French don't. We know that. So, but Americans are doing this by 1814. And then he also says they're principally of the old model, and he calls them the 1763. What he's really meaning is that 66 with the 68.
63-66.
Yeah.
60. Or the 63 light.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's passed away, so we can't bring him up to explain himself. And he says he says in 1814, known by the name commonly of the Charleville musket,
Mhm.
which has served as a pattern of the United States that was intended to follow the contracts of 1798, which involves your Henri Blanc.
Mhm.
Henri Blanc to Thomas Jefferson to E. Whitney made the contract of 1798. But anyways, that's a different story. So from this statement, the terminology of Charleville pattern was born and continued to use until the first American designed musket of 1815, which was very short-lived, supplanted by the 1816.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's basically it. There's contracts going on. They're trying to procure from Ketland, like we talked about, contracts. They're also setting up the national armories. But that concludes my rapid fire presentation on French muskets in the American Revolution and the War of Independence. Sorry
Pretty
if I
good.
speak like a machine gun.
Nope, you're fine. You're fine. That's pretty good. Yeah. So I'm doing like I said, I'm doing a video on French muskets of the Revolutionary War, guns of revolution for this Independence Day. I think we need to do a collaboration.
If I am around, I have a very crazy schedule. That is
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
currently in a hotel room.
Oh, I know how that is.
Yeah.
I spent like the last
No.
3 months in a hotel room.
Well, we gotta get a couple things going because I have a Hall rifle that I would like
Yes.
to hand off, and then also we gotta get you out east to do a reenactment. You know, you gotta come out to one of the big ones, Brandywine, one of the 1,000-member ones. No,
Yep.
I haven't shot any of mine. Yes, I live in the suburbs, so I just look at them and read about them.
Furthest east I think I've ever been was I went to Portsmouth, New Hampshire one time, and that was on a flight going out to the Middle East. And I was
Well, you
laid over
got
there for like 2 hours, and all I could think of was I was sitting here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and all I can think of is like, man, Lexington is not very far.
now you're so close. Yorktown. I mean, we
Yeah.
got Yorktown. We're on that. Williamsburg. It's a hoot, but no, we'll get it done.
I think, yeah, I need to come out that way sometime. I was thinking about that scene from Johnny Tremaine. They're trying to get information out of the British. They're like, well, we could send this canteen up to you if we knew where you were going. Like, I don't think you're going to make deliveries to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. But okay, I'm going to get to. I had a few comments here. I was going to get to real quick. Andrew Dixon wants to know, what unit do you portray? He's like, I much prefer my rifle as militia. The district I portray was noted for the use of the rifle.
So I'm with the 7th Virginia. I obviously don't represent the 7th Virginia. All that disclaimer. I reenact the 7th Virginia. Blue and red is our kind of like a middle colonies color. You're gonna have all sorts of different regimental colors with different facings. But yeah, I'm with the 7th Virginia. And is there a second part of that?
Let's see here.
7th Virginia basically was taken out at the Siege of Charleston, and those who survived were killed at Waxhaws. It was basically most of the Virginia line was completely knocked out at the Siege of Charleston.
So Tarleton was not your best friend then?
No, so we were So we have to hate him, you know. It's built in.
So you know the story. So you know the story about after Waxhaw, right, in the church in Tarleton?
No, are you gonna say did he burn the church?
No, it didn't burn the church down. But he found some of the. I don't know if it was at Waxhaw or if it was right after that. He was chasing down some soldiers who had escaped, who had retreated, and they had fallen back into this church. And Tarleton rode up to the church, and he went and declared that anybody caught giving aid to the rebels was a traitor and would be sent to a prison ship. One of the guys that was lending aid was, I think he was 8 years old, named Andrew Jackson.
Really?
Yep.
Tarleton? I didn't know that.
Tarleton technically made Andrew Jackson the guy he turned out to be.
That's what the cool thing about the Revolution is that
how everything ties together.
Yeah, they're all like the people, like the
Tarleton ties.
The regiments face each other. William Washington and Tarleton face each other a couple times.
Yep.
Cornwallis
Tarleton ties
and
into
Washington.
Simcoe.
Yeah.
Simcoe ties into Robert Rogers.
Yeah.
Robert Rogers ties into Johnny Stark. You
It's a
can.
war of big personalities. That's what's interesting about it because it's so kind of small at the same time. Like you
Yep.
can like, oh, this guy's Daniel Morgan. You know, he's
Yep.
all the way up in Quebec, and then he comes down to
down into
Cowpens.
Virginia or
Yeah.
South Carolina. You know, and then it's like the Battle of Kings Mountain, which is I think is probably the most underrated battle of the Revolution.
Oh yeah.
I would say Kings Mountain and Cowpens working in tandem. Were the
because it happened in the South. People,
Mhm.
I've listened to Patrick O'Kelly had a good talk about this. I think it was
Yep.
Patrick O'Kelly.
Yep,
And he
I've
was
heard it.
saying that, yeah, where it's like, well, they started writing the Revolution at the Centennial, which is 1876, which is close to the end of the Civil War.
Civil War.
So they just do Lexington, Concord, Bunker Hill, Princeton,
Let's be
Yorktown.
honest here. The war did not go well in the North at all.
No.
At all.
No.
Didn't go well in the South for a while, but then that changed. Yeah, Kings Mountain's got to be like Kings Mountain. The reason I say Kings Mountain is probably the battle that changed the wars because Kings Mountain, if it wasn't for Kings Mountain, the United States would not have won Cowpens because, well, they might have, but if Ferguson could have gotten there how he was planning, Cornwallis could have joined up, would have been a completely different story. That and they had Tarleton running around all night thinking, we're going to cross the river here. No, we're going to cross the river there.
Yeah.
Where are we going to cross the river at? Let's see here. iPod Walker wants to know what you know about the Pattern 7. iPod Walker is the guy that got me started on the Pattern 1776 rifle. Okay, like years ago.
I don't know. I'm on French muskets. I'm just trying to get that.
I know a bit about Pattern 1776, a little bit.
You're gonna make a video about it. Yeah.
Yep. Like I said, they've got it ready. I've just got to go get it. Yeah. And I got to build it, and I got to finish my Model 1774 Inspector General's musket first.
What was the name of that book you said that had all the French guns on, or English guns?
I'm going to pull it up here because I don't want to give you the wrong name. It's DeWitt Bailey's. I read through it here a couple of years ago. DeWitt Bailey's. I think
Small
it's
Arms of the British Forces in America.
Hold a second. No, because it's about rifles. Yeah, I think it's the service rifle or the flintlock rifle. Give me just a second here. I've read so much about French muskets since then. It's kind of all gone by the wayside. Somebody asked. Actually, I'm going to go back and while I'm looking for the name of this.
We don't. You can just let me know later.
Somebody had asked you if you had read. There's another book that I don't want to get the name wrong. It's. Give me a second here. I'll find it. Somebody wanted to know if you had read Bob Thompson's Revolutionary Roads. Looks at several turning points that were a close things. New book, very informative and entertaining. That's from Dean Pingle.
Revolutionary Roads. I have not, but I will add it to my reading list.
Yeah. I've got to. This is gonna bug me. Somebody's gonna probably answer it in the comments before I get there. Probably Gray Pilgrim, because he's our book guy. Gray Pilgrim knows a lot about books.
It's the best way to know anything. You have to have a book.
I believe it. I think it's. I don't have any signal here on my phone, but I think it's DeWitt Bailey's British Rifles in the Service, something like that. If you look up DeWitt Bailey's rifle book, you'll find it. It's actually a really good book, and it's funny because I read his book.
I see it. Yeah, British Military Rifles, 1740 to 1840, hardcover, DeWitt Bailey.
Yep, that is an excellent book, and it's funny because I read that one first, and it is a pretty good sized book, and it's very detailed. And it's not huge, but it's about that thick, and that tall. And I was like, well, now I got to read his book on the Brown Bess. And I did that for my Brown Bess video.
Yeah.
And I'm not kidding. That book was this tall and this wide. And at the end of that little tiny book about the Brown Bess or the land pattern muskets and all that, he puts in there, he goes, there were British rifles, and he just puts like a little bit on there. He's like, there were British rifles. I may need to do a small pamphlet on British rifles in the service. And then you realize the next book that he comes out with is that giant book on the rifle, extremely detailed.
That's what you need. So Schmidt, who writes U.S. Military, he actually did a book on the hull first.
Yeah.
And this book is just, it's great. I've told you about it plenty of times. So I was like, oh, I have a hull. I need a hull book. And they stopped producing it. So it's like $300 online. I was like, man, I'm not going to make my mortgage at this rate.
I was looking over there, and I had lost my Haythornwaite's weapons and equipment of the Napoleonic Wars. And right before the live chat, I was over there. I was like, hey, there it is. I've been looking for that. It's over at my brother's house over here. So yeah, that's something. It's funny because you went down the path, and it's something I need to get to. The path of the French muskets in the Revolutionary War. And I got into French muskets because of the American Revolutionary War. And then all of my books that I've got just kind of go over the Revolutionary War and then straight to the Napoleonic War. And I kind of got into that. Now that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
So much history. So much to just, it's like a fire hose of information.
Gray Pilgrim says he's just a dumb hillbilly. I'm like, nope. Gray Pilgrim is the guy to go to for a lot of very good information. He suggested a few books to me that I got that were really good. Let's see here. No, somebody had asked, iPod Walker had asked, he had asked about if there were any captured pattern 1776 rifles or the Ferguson rifle. I don't know about the Ferguson rifle, but I know that there was at least one pattern 1776 that was captured, and it was in not very good shape. And I believe that was the one that the rifle shop got a hold of that they cast their pattern off of.
So Ferguson has the rifles at Brandywine, but he doesn't have them at Kings Mountain.
I don't know if he has them at Kings Mountain or not. I would assume he would. But
there's a reenactor that has a Ferguson, and he's like, the only event I can use it is Brandywine. Maybe he just doesn't go south to Kings Mountain.
Maybe.
But yeah, it's a crazy looking gun.
Yeah, I may or may not be having one of those on back order from the rifle shop too. That's gonna be. I've got to build like 6 different rifle shop guns before I get to that one. That's gonna be a chore. Like I got the first one I started out with was a wheel-lock pistol.
Yeah.
And I'd talked to the guy later on at the rifle shop, and I messed that build up not pretty bad, but I messed it up a little bit, and I ended up breaking the trigger, which the trigger on that is actually pretty complicated. And I talked to him. He's like, how's that wheel-lock pistol going? I'm like, it's on hold for now because that 1774 is way easier to build. He's like, yeah, I was thinking about telling you that. The hardest lock to build, or the easiest lock to build, is a musket lock because it's big and there's a lot of room for error. The harder locks to build are the pistol locks, and the hardest lock of the pistol locks is a wheel lock pistol lock. He said. So you started off hard, but yeah. Let's see here. No,
go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no. I think there were a few. Maybe a handful of pattern 1776s captured, but to be quite honest, there weren't a whole lot to begin with. Like I said, 800 of the normal pattern 1776, and then 200 of the Hanoverian pattern 1776. Let's see here. He had another question. So at the end of the war, what happened to the excess of British arms when they surrendered?
Storage. They went into storage. So they went to the arsenals. And I can actually tell you right now how many they had. They had something like, they were they did not have enough.
Andrew Dixon says, he's like, I could be dead wrong. We'll see if he is. You got the book there. He says, but as far as I know, the surrendered arms were, but as far as surrendered arms, they were in stores as far as I'm aware. Those in places like Charleston and New York City went back to Canada, best I can understand.
Yeah, that's basically right.
Yep.
Springfield, West Point, but even though there are nearly 50,000 muskets in storage after the Revolutionary War, there are only 8,000 bayonets. And if, like, I'm going to just be doing this guy, he breaks it down to how many guns are in each place. So, Ethan, you got to get the book.
I know. I've got a lot of books, and I need to add that one to my collection.
But they go into storage, and actually, when they first start making the American Charlevilles, they pull parts. So that also builds in. So Joseph Perkins, he works as a contractor repairing guns in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He has experience with that, and he is the first superintendent of Harper's Ferry Arsenal. This is where the Joseph Perkins works. He fixes muskets. His initials are IP. These initials are stamped into the stocks of muskets that come from Philadelphia, but there's no concrete, everything you need, proof, right? That says that he never signs a certificate that says, I use IP at, yeah. So it's so probably him, but yeah. But
that brings up another thing Garrett had mentioned about Henri Blanc and Springfield and Harper's Ferry. So the U.S. government had looked very seriously into, whenever I say like Henri Blanc was sent to set up two factories like Charleville and Saint Etienne.
Yeah.
Harper's Ferry and Springfield. With that, he was also supposed to set up the machinery for interchangeable parts, like the French did, until they looked at what the cost was going to be for interchangeable parts. And that was what I thought was funny, is I was talking with Garrett. It's like, yeah, Louis liked to spend the money a lot, and it kind of got him in the end.
Yeah, he definitely
kind of lost his head over the deal. Anyhow. There's Garrett right now. But no, speaking about, we're talking about interchangeable parts at Springfield and why they didn't do it.
I said it earlier. As soon as you say interchangeable parts, that's a whole rabbit hole.
You're gonna have 1,000 manpower.
Here, he's here. I'll let him explain it to you. Go ahead, Garrett. Explain it.
Well, if you've got 2,000 men working at the factory that are skilled, you can pull it off, but you got to pay all those guys, or wait until machinery comes along.
Yeah.
You can make 100 muskets that fit together pretty good, but machinery moves, gauges move, gauges get out of whack. And by the time you get to 200 muskets, maybe the 299th doesn't fit the first 10, and you don't have interchangeable parts anymore.
Yep.
The only way to do it is massive spending and massive amounts of manpower. And there's one thing the United States doesn't do is spend money on guns.
Hey, the Hall rifle, right? That was expensive.
He says the Hall rifle was expensive, right?
Yeah.
It took 5 years before he produced the first one.
The Hall rifle, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interchangeable because it's Harper's Ferry. Harper's Ferry is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. Springfield is just mass production. Put them out.
No, it's so interesting, that whole we needed like a 2-hour just breakdown of the production. Do you know much about the assembly numbers on the inside of, like, Harper's Ferry has these assembly numbers? So the bottom of a barrel will have like 7. The inside of a stock will have 7. The tang of the barrel will have a 4. The screws will have 4s.
Yeah. So
it's supposed to be matching. So when you put it together, I'm still trying to hunt that down.
I'm pretty sure that's the same thing as like what the French did. He's talking about numbering of the parts on the Harper's Ferry guns. It's like, that's pretty sure. Because like my AN9, when you look at that gun, every part inside of the lock has got the same number. Every part, it's like it's all. Really? It's like it's a part of. I think it has to do with the machine, if I remember right. or the inspector. It's
Okay.
either the inspector or the machine it was built on. Which is funny though, because that Lehman rifle, it's got the same thing. It's got those numbers all over the place.
Well, even
Weird.
Harper's Ferry didn't reach true interchangeability till late 1830s, early,
Yeah.
because they built the Blanchard mill out of cast iron. The Blanchard lathe.
What he said.
But they didn't. Even the hulls for what was interchangeable, I don't think literally every little screw was interchangeable, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. I was just impressed with, like I said, with the 1779 and the AN9 and the 1774, how much of all those parts were actually interchangeable.
You could do it. You just have to have a big bankroll.
Yep. Which America did not have, and neither did France after.
It's kind of like adopting a repeating arm. Just all you got to do is bankrupt your country.
Yeah. That reminds me. I saw, and I know I need to cut the straight, or we'll go on for a little while longer. But I saw a comment on it was on Facebook, and it was somebody who couldn't understand why the British were so dumb as to not adopt the Ferguson rifle as the standard military arm during the
simple.
war.
It's so simple. The war's already going on. You already
Yeah,
have them there.
man, just-
You've made it before. Just make it again.
Just make several 100,000 of these things, and you're
Just
good to
do
go.
it. Yeah, they're having a hard enough
Build whole new
time getting
factories
their.
instead of the machine. People don't take into account the amount of machinery that's required for such.
No.
I think it was Mark Novak had said there was only 2 men in the world who could build that Ferguson breech system. Knock and I can't remember who the other one was, but he's like Henry Knock was one of them. He said that was that helical locking system. He said that was a work of art. And another thing a lot of people don't realize is the Ferguson was not the first military breech loading arm, even for the British. I can't remember the name of it, but there was one that the military didn't officially adopt, but it was basically the same thing as the Ferguson. The only real difference was you really had to, I think it was like 10 or 12, 10, 11, 12 turns you had to do to unscrew that breech. And then if you went too far, you could actually completely unscrew the breech. I'm sure Gray Pilgrim, I think he's talked about this before. But yeah, the Ferguson was basically a modification of that rifle.
Yeah, because didn't he kind of poach the idea from somebody?
And it was actually a sporting arm. It was designed for hunters who were either prone or in a tree, so you didn't have to load. You could load from the breech. Soylent Green says reeling a fish between each shot. Yep, that's probably what you could have done with that rifle. And I can't. Let's see. Okay, Andrew Dixon's got something here. There was some conjecture, but after the Battle of Brandywine and maybe Paoli, but after the men went back and the rifles back into stores, it's documented that De Peyster had 1776 rifles for half his men. There you go. See, I've just read from it. I just know what I've read from DeWitt Bailey, talking about it, and I don't really remember him saying what happened. I know that I don't remember what DeWitt Bailey said happened to 1776 after the war, but all I do know is what I've heard from the rifle shop, and I'm pretty sure they said theirs was a captured pattern 1776 that they went and did that work off of. Which also I got a hold of them the other day. I'm going to see. I asked them and they said they were interested. I'm going to send that. I think I'm going to send that pattern 1779 Colonial Troop musket into them, and they're going to make castings off of it so people can get a
awesome
pattern 1779 Colonial Troop musket.
Man, those things are so cool.
And it's just what's funny is I had commented on your YouTube video about that musket, and I had not even seen that listing yet. Because I was like, man, I was reading about the 1779 Colonial Troop musket, and I found this about what I think your mystery musket is. And then it was like a week later, I found a Colonial Troop musket.
I love that. I mean, that mystery musket, when I do make it out, that thing's going to get shot because that thing is fun. Of all the ones
I'm convinced that your mystery musket is a Revolutionary era Belgian gun. I'm pretty convinced. And
No,
from
your
what
I
I'm-
mean your arguments work. It's not a African trade gun.
there was
that-
something. Yeah, no, because I have one of those, and they don't even
That's
look like.
Yeah, the lock
need to-
is completely different.
I did a guess this gun on it, video on it, and I need to do an actual video on it because it's entertaining. Talking about the Belgian African trade musket. The
one that's sitting there here.
no, that's British. The A9 we have at home. But
Whenever you get a chance, I was just going to mention a few things about when you were talking about the cost of the Springfield
Mhm.
musket of Charleville pattern.
yeah,
Well, the first year of production, they didn't have a
can
transport.
you hear what he's saying over here?
Oh, they didn't have a trans what?
Go ahead.
The first year of production, Springfield didn't have a transportation system from the water shops to the hill shops. So they had to pack
Oh.
every single piece 1 mile each direction, pack it up, build it down at the water shops, pack it a mile up the hill, finish it, pack it a mile back down the hill to put it all together and do the file work. And as time went on, they got a better as the first few years went on, they got a better transportation system up and down the hill. And then they had a drought in the late 1700s that cost them a lot more money because the river went low, and they had to. I think that one year that he said that it wound up costing $20 again. That was the year.
1798.
That was the year they installed some of the
okay.
first steam shops because
they
the river was low, so they had to use steam power.
There's why
bring
it
it
cost
back up.
more. They had a drought and they had to
Yeah.
build machinery for steam.
That is funny because Harper's Ferry kind of runs through like
I
if
think
the
they're
if the river's
1798 or
low.
99, I don't remember which.
Yeah, 1798.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1798. It's $21 per.
Yep. That was to pay for machinery, evidently, because of a drought. That's
Those
why I
are-
like having Garrett around.
Yeah, that's some great stuff. It's just crazy when you compare them. Obviously, it's different place, different time. But like
Build
France
a-
is
they
just
build a
so
factory
far.
a mile from the river.
Yeah. Garrett says who would build a factory a mile from the river? Evidently Springfield. Henri Blanc probably had something to do with that. Let's see here. Let's see. Yeah, iPod Walker said Ferguson improved the breech screw, so one turn would do not the 10. Yep. And like I also said, they had issues with, memory serves me right, they had issues with if you accidentally went too far, it wouldn't stop, and you could actually unscrew the entire breech, and then you're sitting there trying to thread your breech back into place. Not a captive system. Gray Pilgrim says the whole Connecticut Valley was full of gunsmiths, which is why all their families were intermarried. The river turned a lot of water mills. Yep. Yeah, so anyhow, we're getting close to 2 3/4 of an hour here. We'll probably run till 2 hours and 45 minutes, probably run for another couple minutes here. You guys got any more questions real quick? Go ahead and throw them out there. Yeah. Soylent Green says that Rivero 311 made me buy the Muskets of the Revolution Ahern book.
So I'm here
I still
for.
haven't gotten it. Like I said, I went and I was going to go to American War of Independence, and then something happened, and I went right by it and into Napoleonic War, which I just found I got way
You want
deeper.
them all.
Yeah, I got way deeper into the Napoleonic War than I ever planned to.
So I just picked up in the last week a Hull and a Charleville Type 2, and I have a Charleville Type 3 video coming out this weekend. So it's been a very expensive couple weeks, but I
Yeah.
got a Type 2 and a Type 3, so it's been all Charleville all the time. Harper's Ferry. And
Yep.
the only thing I wish they would just like, hey, can you take the lock off so I can see inside? I want to look at the markings, but auction house don't do that.
Yeah, nope, they don't. That was I think you saw that A9 video when we took that gun or Garrett took that gun apart,
Yeah.
and the scarf joint that they did over there underneath that barrel band.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. Even if
Yeah.
it's broken, that was some beautiful work done on that gun.
So I have this Type 3 has a split stock. And I didn't even notice it until a few hours into messing around with it. So I'm kind of curious. It's walnut and it's from the lowest barrel band forward.
Mm-hmm.
But the stock has the assembly number that matches the barrel.
Mm-hmm.
But the middle barrel band and the front barrel band cap with the front side post, whatever, those are new, and then the stock's new. So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts, if you think I think it's an Arsenal rebuild, but man, like I don't.
Which one's that on?
That's a American Charleville Type 3 made 1816. So I have that video I'm releasing this weekend.
We'll have Garrett will watch it. He'll know.
Okay. I'm curious. Yeah.
There was a question, though, I had about your mystery musket, and I don't know if I asked it yet or not. So the flats on the breech, does it have the 5 flats or does it have the 2?
I think
it's just
2. I think it's just 2. Yeah.
If you got just 2 flats, you've actually got, I would definitely say you're probably safe to shoot. Because that's pre-1784, 1777 musket.
Okay.
1784, they went to 5 flats, and it's you were talking about why the United States. We'll go for just a little bit longer here, and then I'll let you go. But talking about the United States, why they went with a 1766 reading wise, what I can find out is like Bianchi claims that the 1766 lock was the most. I think it was Bianchi who claimed it was the most reliable of all of the French locks, and possibly one of the most reliable locks ever made. And then it's like the 1777, which comes afterwards, the pre-revolutionary era, 1777, is he claims he said people claim, he takes neither side, but he says the pre-revolutionary era, 1777, is the greatest military flintlock possibly ever made, and he's like the Revolutionary Era war hit or miss. And then he says, and then the A and 9 is just like a step under the 77. But anyhow, what all that boils into is I think the Americans, another reason, and it may not have even, nobody may have mentioned it, but I think they probably fell in love with that reliability of that lock, if I was to guess.
Yeah.
So do you remember how many rounds it was before they had a misfire they did in that test? I can't remember the number off the top of my head.
I can't remember off the top of the head.
It's a lot. It was a lot. But yeah.
But everyone loves the Brown Bess. We'll bring it full circle.
Yeah.
Until 10 years ago, it was just Brown Besses here, Brown Besses there.
Yeah. Americans used Brown Besses and Kentucky long rifles.
Yeah. No, it's all about once you've had the privilege of having bands and you can take your barrel off your stock, you will never not. I hate the pin system.
Me too.
And they're like, well, it's designed like that. It's like, well, it's poor design.
It's poor design.
You should let your men take the stock off so they can clean.
They can clean their weapon.
Yeah, so they can clean their weapon. Like, I don't know.
Let's see here. Oh, we got a comment. Let's see here. Yeah, it's kind of winding down. Gray Pilgrim says he has a Brown Bess. Yep. I've got a couple.
Good. I mean, they're fun. They are fun. Musket. Sorry, they are. I have one too. Like I have it. I like it. Like if I can purchase an original one, I will. I
got 3.
You have 3. Yeah, and you have an original one too. You have one that was
actually it's sitting right over there. I just can't touch it because it's getting its stock rebuilt by Garrett. But yeah, it's a. I believe I used to think it was a Longland pattern. I don't really know why, but it's actually an India pattern that's been converted over to percussion lock. But yeah, I've got 3, and I will always, even though, and I think we'll end it up with this right here. Ask you a question, but I will always have a soft spot in my heart for the Brown Bess because it was the first flintlock I ever shot, the Longland pattern, an Indian made. Military heritage, Bombay pipe bomb, whatever people like to call them. That Longland pattern will always hold a special place in my heart. But the minute I got my hands on, even if it was the Indian made 1768, that's not historically accurate from the box, I fell in love.
It's
And
yeah,
so that
it's a game changer.
yeah, and that brings us around. And the first place I ever heard of the Charleville was actually, or the French muskets in the American War of Independence, was a book I'd read a long time ago, a history book, and I thought that was interesting because all I'd heard about really was Brown Bess this, Brown Bess that, and that brings us to the question, Rivero 311. Before we call it a night, where was the first place? We're going to make this 2 questions. Where was the first place you ever heard of the French muskets, or the Charleville in particular, in the American War of, being used in the American War of Independence, or just heard of it in general? And which is your favorite pattern of French musket? Go.
First I heard of it. Well, I played Battlegrounds back in the early 2000s, so I must have played it with the Charleville. But I mean, I'm pretty recent to the flintlock experience. It is an experience.
Yeah, it is.
So I guess reenacting.
What year did you get started?
2021. So
Oh, so you got started a year after me.
Yeah.
I started in
so-
2020. Ammo
then
shortage.
I mean, this kind of why I've even made a channel, because there's nothing online. There's nothing on YouTube. And I was looking around, like, so I bought this Harper's Ferry conversion model 1816, knew nothing about it, went to YouTube, and there's nothing. And I was like,
And what there is not right.
Yeah, and what there
Really?
is not right. So I was like, so I started making these videos. My first videos, that's why they're not edited. They're for my buddy that works at the museum, because I wanted to show him my auction win, and then some people watched them. So, and then so it's just kind of been like, and then been following you, and you completely changed the whole game on like the India pipe bomb stuff. And when you proof that barrel, it's still one of my favorite videos. Not to fangirl too hard, but like no. And then I think you've done a great job of bringing up the common sense application from like the standpoint of having barrel bands. There's a reason everybody else goes with barrel bands. My favorite gun is got to be a 1766 with the improvements, because that's what I have. So I spent the time, to make sure I got it right, and so that one, I just love them. They're so light. My original is 8.5 pounds. It's a good. I guess
Good. Mine's not too far off then.
Yeah. What is your Charleville 68 Veteran Arms now weigh?
So I think it's like 8 pounds and 6 ounces.
Okay,
It's
great.
light.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very light.
Because an actual one, it's like 10 pounds out of the box, and that's what I hate.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want, and I saw
It's
you
thick.
shaded down. All right, yeah. So no, it's been anything French infantry muskets, and this has been. Thank you so much for having me on. You actually really pushed me to get my notes together, because I've had 30 pages of random stuff. I'm like, oh, I need to get this in a more concise.
Well, you're doing better than me, because you're sitting here, and it's funny because you start talking about this stuff, and whenever I do a video, I'll study up on it, and then I kind of brain dump a lot of the stuff, afterwards. You'll have it when you're making the video, and it's just in your head.
Yeah.
I don't use teleprompters. Sometimes I'll have notes. Sometimes I'll have my book sitting there with me. But usually whenever I'm done with the video, I'll move on to my next one, and then all that stuff kind of goes by the wayside. So I'm just sitting here listening to you, and I'm like, yep, okay. And then it's like, oh, yeah, I remember reading this now. It's like it's coming back to me slowly but surely.
We're looking at the same sources, so I'm just pulling it from sources. I'm not, yeah. So
Andrew Dixon said he was at Guilford with you.
I know, he's a good boy of mine. He's a good friend. We're gonna
something about a 3-pounder.
Yeah. I think he killed me. He killed me out there.
Oh, did he?
Andrew Dixon actually was the one that he knows what's coming with this Charleville this weekend. I messed up. I made a mistake on the buy, but there's always it happens.
I need to get me a 3-pounder Verbruggen gun. But I got to get a wall gun. I got to get my wall gun in and built first.
It seems like you got a lot of guns to fix, and then you're gonna have a Hall rifle to fix here right shortly. So
I've got, I'm gonna think of this off the top of my head. 1774, paddle butt wheel lock carbine, 2 AKs, because I do that kind of as a side hobby. I got Adelette wheel lock. I got a Snap-Hans, a Dutch wheel lock Fowler, a wall gun, a Ferguson, a Pattern 1776. Let's see, what else am I working on here? I'm probably going to do more work on Old Char eventually. Garrett's doing he's doing that Brown Bess in there. He's fixing the stock on it, and I got to look around here. Oh, and I got to fix a spring for a mole rifle. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, and my Willock pistol that I'm putting on hold right now because it's makes me sad when I think about it. But anyhow,
Content for days, man. Looking forward to it.
well, anyhow, guys, it's getting pretty late, so I think we'll call it a night here.
All right.
So, as always, guys, thank you for watching. Trust in God and keep your powder dry. Bye.